So I'm going to officially open the 50-second meeting of the FileMaker Brighton user group and the second one online. Many thanks to Gary for the amazing amount of work he's been doing, setting all this up, which is great. Welcome. Apparently it's being hosted by me and Gary. Well, that's strictly speaking, it's being hosted by Gary, and I'm doing the bit from this end. Okay, on the agenda tonight, we've got a data migration demo by James, showing us the data migration tool actually being used. Jordan's going to talk to us about the partner council, because we're all wondering what it is. Well, some of us are wondering what it is. So then we've got a discussion about setting any field to empty, because that came from one of my users who comes to the group fairly regularly. An interesting guy. He's retired, plays with FileMaker, but he still gets a lot of pleasure out of it. And then we've got a talk on data logging, which is John is going to give us. I'm really looking forward to that. He's got some new views on how to do some data logging. And then finally, we'll have a FileMaker 19 demo from Doug. Those are the instructions, which I think are on we'll leave up on the top eventually.
Let's just go. Let's go.
Yeah, let's just get started. Right. Okay, so we're kicking off with the data migration and James. So I'm going to stop presenting. And James is going to take over, hopefully. This will go smooth as anything.
I'm going to click the button. And
hi, Roger, by the way. This is that just before you get on there, I just see that Roger's just come. It was Roger who prompted the discussion about best way to empty a field.
Right. Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can see my my screen here. It's got a data migration assistant in the main window. I was going to do this on my Mac, and I am still doing it on my Mac, but I'm having to do it through AWS instance of a Windows server, because Catalina doesn't allow the method that this uses to do its final steps currently. There's an Apple script thing that isn't giving you any form of window to say OK. So a bit of panic ensued earlier on today, but we've got it working on Windows, so we'll do it on there. So there are a couple of things that are required before you just go hell for leather and do a data migration. And I'm going to post in the chat here. Hopefully you'll see two things that you have to download. The first thing is the data migration tool from FileMaker itself, which you need to be a developer to download, but the link for it is there. And the second thing is what I'm using for this is Productive Computing have created a rather excellent data migration assistant, which is just easy, as I will show you. With that comes, so I didn't quite copy everything, so I'm going to do this next bit as well. Copy there and paste in there. So they have a thing called Productive Computing University. And it is very, very worthwhile enrolling in that. You don't have to pay for it. And they've got a course on the FM Data Migration Assistant, which is pretty much what I'm going to show you now. But it's well worth enrolling in that because it's step by step and it's just simple and it explains to you exactly how to use it. All three links are in the chat there for you to take away and use as you will. All right, so we've done the two downloads. Let's move into what we're actually going to see. So I've got an example file here. And I've done it so that it is password protected and encrypted. You don't actually have to do that, but it is obviously a good idea if you do. So I'm going to show you, try not to say my password out loud as I type it. So what I've got here is just a very basic contacts invoices thing I've been playing with. And you can see here that it's got my name, James Kelly, and not much else. My email address and some notes in here saying added stuff. Okay. Now, what I want to do, imagine that you are that this file is live in your production environment, and somebody said to you, what we want to do is we want to change this button here to red. We want to get rid of this field, this VAT number field. Don't need that there. I want to add a script, and I want to add another table. So, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to take a development copy of this, do that because we don't want to be adjusting it while it's in the production environment. So we go here and we say File, Save a copy as 0 example dev. Okay, and we're going to stick that in the same folder as everything else, which is the data migration demo. So we'll pop that in there. We'll close this one because this is the example, and we want to open the dev file. There we go. Same thing again. Okay. So what we're going to do is going to take this. First of all, we're going to take that note out because I don't really want that in there for this demo. We're going to rats. Using keystrokes on a Mac whilst connected to a PC isn't the easiest way of demonstrating rat. Okay, so let's go into layout mode. All right, so what we wanted to turn that one into a red button. Okay, we want to hide this. Doing a whole load of dev changes. We want to go into the script menu, and we want to add a new script in there. Let's call that test script, and let's stick a set variable. That'll do. So at least you can see it's got some data in the script, and we'll save that. Okay, what else should we do? Let's make a quick change to the database itself. Let's stick a new table in. Just table. Create that, and just for the fun of it, let's stick a relationship on that there, and make another one of them. Relationship there. Okay, so we've done some fundamental changes to the background of the development database. Oh, have to click the save button. All right, so we can see this is the development, the database here. That field there has been hidden. This button's turned to red, and I've taken some data out of here. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to test these changes in development environment, which we've done. Users have come back to say, yeah, those things are exactly what we wanted. Can you now push them to the production environment? And we can say, yes, we can. Now, the problem is, of course, the production environment, all the data will have changed because everybody's going to be playing on it. So historically, what we have to do is we have to make a note of everything that we've done. We've changed that button to red. We've got rid of that field. We've added that table. We've added 2 relationships. We've got a checklist of all those things, and then we have to go into the production file and make all those changes. But what we do now is, rather than doing that, we utilize the wonderful data migration. So what we do first is we save a clone of the development one. So we could save in a clone of the one with all the changes. Just do save there, and we call it clone. We don't want to open it because we don't want to see it. We're saving it in the same place. So there we go. That's now been created. We can close that one. I'll just show you the... What happens is, of course, the law of presentation, closing the wrong window. Close that one. Okay, and then we go to the data migration assistant. So we've got everything that we need in the background. the first thing you do with your data migration assistant is you configure the options. You have to load the FileMaker data migration tool. So these are the two things that I've told you to download in the chat screen. There's a Windows one here, which I've downloaded from FileMaker. It's a zipped folder. It's quite important it's a zipped folder, but all those instructions are in with this tool from Productive Computing. You simply browse to it. It's in the data migration demo download folder there. We choose that one and open it. I've already put it in, so it gives me an error warning, but yes, I do wish to proceed. Okay, and that's it. That now is linking the Productive Computing tool to the FileMaker tool. We click continue there, and that's all the setup you actually have to do. It's pretty easy. And then you click this plus button, and you have to put in two databases. You put in a database, the production database, which has got all of the data in it, and then you put the clone database, which is the one with all the structure changes. So 0 example was the first one. We pop that one in there. And then the clone with all the changes, but no data, goes in there. Now, these need to be configured with the correct it's very difficult to do this without saying my password and my encryption password out loud. So I have to actually be silent when I'm doing it. Okay, so that's it. All you've got to do there is just make sure that you put the right admin name and password and the encryption key for both, as they are one is a clone of the other in effect. Then all those details are the same. You hit the big blue migrate databases button. It does a little think about it, opens up terminal, oh sorry, command prompt. And then command prompt will give you a little rundown of things that, so it might give you some warnings, or it might give you a message which isn't a warning. That time it did give me a warning because it said that has already been created. So we'll just go back in here and say, what are we trying to do? So, and I'll tell you what we're trying to do. There's one button that I didn't show you, which is this one here. And that tells you the path where we're going to send the resulting file to, which is quite important to fill in. So we browse that, we go data migration demo, I want to put it back in the same folder. Okay, so now it knows where it's going to send the file to. We can close that and we'll press the migrate databases again. We should get a nice long list of things that have been done. And it gives you a little summary at the end of the accounts migrated and the data that's been sent backwards and forwards. You can open that back up and take a look at it if you're that interested. But what I'd really like to have a look at is this one here, which is the migrated example. We double click that. We go silent while we fill that in, just so that we don't blur out any important information. And here we have a database with all of the records, 49 in there. You see that the added stuff that we removed from the dev file is back because that was data from the production environment. It's got a red button here. It doesn't have this file. Sorry, it doesn't have this field. Now let's have a look. We changed a couple of things in the background as well. We added a test script. There we are with that one step in it. And we also made some changes to the database in the back end. We had a new table. There it is, new test table. And we made two TOs there, which we related in. So there you go. It's an entire replica of the dev environment, but it's got all of the data from the production environment. And that's taken, what, if I hadn't have made any errors, it would have taken about 20 seconds. So there it is. It's as simple as that. And all of the information in the chat will get you up and running.
Nice. Superb. Cheers, James.
All right.
Impressive. Has anyone got any questions? If you have, raise your hand, unmute yourself, but do it one at a time.
See,
No one.
So simple.
Was that riveting? It was so good.
I've got a question.
Go on, Joel.
What sort of size data files have you tried that with?
So we've used that. We used that in Johnson & Johnson, going from in the middle of a sprint. So from the main dev system to the production environment, and that was I think that was 4 gig.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty robust.
And how long
So
did that
I'm
take?
going to chip in on that one because I've probably got some of the largest databases of everyone that's here.
Yeah.
So does it matter the migration speed? Obviously, I assume the performance of it is very different. If you've got a massive multi-layered, multi-tabled solution, it's going to take a substantial longer length of time to then migrate that.
Yeah, it's not instant on a big one, but it's surprising how fast it is. I wish I could actually remember how long it took us to do that data migration, but it was, we were looking at having to spend days reprogramming a production server with all the changes that we'd done in dev over a couple of months, and we just set that going. It was counted in minutes rather than days. Let's put it that way.
We could be a test. I'll have a look and see.
Yeah, do. Yes.
Cool.
The Clarus guy will. So basically, we had this example in of a company in south of France where they do a banking solution, and previously when they were doing updates, it used to take 21 hours. That was moving the data, that was uploading all the sort of new layout and stuff like that. And the problem is because it's banking, working hours is Monday to Friday evening. So the only time you can do the updates is over the weekend. And so 21 hours basically from Friday end of business, which is about 7 p.m. I think for them, meant that if you were to do the update, it had to work on the Saturday because there was no way for you to do any fixes on the Sunday. And with this new tool, they got it down to 21 to 3 hours. And I think now they got it down to 2 hours, which means that over the weekend, if there's any issues or stuff they want to modify, they have enough time to be able to do it. And so for them, they were like, this is ideal. They were part of the ETS for that tool. But I mean, if you have a huge amount of data, it will save you a huge amount of time.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's a sales pitch finish for you.
Sorry to be a bit late. The 8 gigs. Yeah, for us, for an 8 gig file, it takes a couple of hours. Before it was like 10.
Cool.
Sorry to be a bit late to the thing here. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear.
All right, sorry. Yeah, sorry to be a bit late. So I missed the beginning. Is this you? I think you were presenting on Windows. Is it Mac compatible as well?
Yes. So the premise I started with was I would normally do this on a Mac, but having tried it out this afternoon, Catalina won't allow me to run the Apple script because of the crazy stranglehold they've got on the system preferences. There will be a way around that, but I didn't have enough time to work on it today, so I
Okay, fine.
put it on Windows instead.
Is it so? It's compatible with previous versions of OS X then?
Yeah, it works fine on everything before Catalina.
Oh wow! And sorry, I've also missed the chat. Where can I get hold of it?
In the chat. Yeah. Oh, I see. Which if you've come in late, I'll repost that then.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's just a copy and paste for me. 1, 2. Right. There's the first step. Oops, coming at you.
Just to let everyone know, the chat, I'm going to copy the chat out and it'll be posted. Joel will get it and he'll post it out. We'll have to find somewhere. We'll find somewhere on the site to stick the chat messages. But do keep a note of as it goes along, because there's no guarantee all this text going to work by the end of it. So I hope it does. All of a sudden, we'll have no chat at all.
Hey guys, how you all doing?
Hey, Orlando.
Good.
You're right. Yeah,
I
had the same problem on the Mac with that version, and I moved over to DB services, tool, which works very well on the Mac.
Ah, cool, excellent.
So I can post the link once I dig out the link and post it. But yeah, just to, if you're on the latest version of Mac, DB Services has one that works brilliantly.
Fantastic, yeah, that would be.
And also on performance, I tried it with a client's 7 gig file that was an all-in-one, hundreds of tables, and it ran in about 14 minutes. Give you an idea.
That's pretty good going.
I think it's just on that as well. I don't know whether anybody else has got experience, but we've used the Otto, the DevOps tool by Geist Interactive, and that allows you to schedule the migrations, and it will take the dev copy down for you, do the clone, do the migration, and post it back onto the live server as well. Takes a lot more setup, and it's a lot more involved, but it is almost as close to having a fully DevOps deployment environment that you can get.
Nice. And what's that one called? Sorry.
It's Otto. It is a paid service from Geist Interactive.
Right.
It requires installing like a Node JS server on the servers. But in essence, you can point at your dev environment, your staging environment, or your live environment, and you can actually schedule a migration to happen overnight or at a period. It will run automatically and do all the moving around for you. To be clear, it is a lot more involved in terms of the setup. It's a lot more technical. But if you're managing a product or something that requires out of hours or a strange time for downtime, then it's super efficient.
Nice.
Are we at all concerned about having to enter in the passwords, the administrative passwords in the solution for the migration?
Yeah, that's. I'm not sure how DB Services version deals with it, but yeah, you could theoretically quite easily open up the data viewer and see all of that data. So that's definitely a shortfall of it, I would say.
Yeah, the DB Services one is exactly the same.
Right.
But that's why you need to put your own password on it before you start.
Right.
The actual call in terminal or the command prompt puts the passwords in plain text. So even if you protect the DB Services thing, if you go to the terminal and type in history, it should all be there, which I find a bit terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've got the option to create a privilege in FileMaker so that it doesn't actually see the data. So if you create your privilege in your FileMaker solution and then you sign out a password, and that's been used by the developer, and no one can actually get access to it. So it's basically just working for the tool. It's copying the data, but if you use that password and username to get into the file, it's not going to let you get inside it. I think you have to call it FM. I can't remember the name of it. Let me see if I can find it on the website. I should know it.
Using that privilege set definitely works really well, but it doesn't give as detailed a summary. So if there are errors in your migration, then you can only read them if you've logged in with a full access account.
I see. So a solution would be to create an administrative password that you just turn off during the migration, that you enable during the migration process, and then when you're done with the migration, just turn it off again to reduce the risk.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Somebody gets hold of your logs or your terminal log, then it would reduce the risk. That's basically the only way we can work around it.
That seems a good solution.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
Yeah,
anyone else got anything to add to that? Sorry.
I was going to say, if you call it FM migration, I'll just put the link to the guide in the chat. If you just call it FM migration, and that account will just be there to actually sort of get the tool to work and nothing else.
Oh, cool.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. So, shall we move on to the next thing? Thank you very much, James, and thanks for the discussion everywhere. Nice presentation, well handled with the tech issues. The next thing I've got on the agenda is the Partner Council introduction. That's you, Jordan.
Thanks, Joel. I don't have anything to present, and I'll try and be as efficient as possible.
Well, when I say presentation, I mean Jordan speaking.
Yeah, of course. I think there's two things that I want to run through very briefly. Number one is just to make introduce everybody for the people who aren't aware, haven't been aware of the Claris Partner Council, and secondly, just to run through the Claris COVID response team, which the council are also helping with as well, just to make sure everybody's aware of it, everybody's knows what's happening, and secondly, just so that you know where the point of reference is, or if like me, I think everybody may have heard of it but doesn't actually know, or could be interested to hear what actually happens or goes on, or learn about it. So in essence, the Claris Partner Council is a group of 8 Claris partners around the world who get together. The council gets together on a regular basis every month or so, and then we have a meeting with Claris once or twice a quarter. And in essence, what we're trying to do is we're trying to be the voice for the partners and users and customers in a formal setting that we can express as one voice the views of the community and the partners, in order to try and obviously influence or at least make sure that our voices are being heard at the highest level. So I recently joined the Partner Council in the last quarter, so this is my first round. What I can say is that the council probably needs to be a lot more vocal, a lot more honest and open and transparent with the rest of the partners as to what is actually happening, what the council are doing, because the council does work extremely hard to portray what people are feeling, whether that's partners or users, or what we're seeing on a daily basis. But my feedback to the council is we don't express this enough to the wider partner community or community in general, the things that are being talked about, and also the direction that the council are trying to push. Obviously, it's hard to share everything that happens in those council meetings, but I think we can be a lot more honest with people in terms of what we're talking about and share that message a lot more. So what I want to do is just quickly run you through some of the key things that is the focus for the council for at least the foreseeable couple of quarters that we're trying to, maybe lobby is too strong of a word, but trying to reflect our experience to the upper levels inside Claris. So the first one is we're pushing Claris to be for us to understand more around their market position and their target customer, and what it is that would ideally benefit partners, or we think could benefit partners more. So that's, again, not necessarily saying that everybody needs bigger and larger customers, but making sure that there is a steady stream of businesses who have the spending power to spend with partners. The second one is everybody's aware of potentially the chronic shortage in developers. Everybody's busy, or we're busy, I suppose, before the climate that we're currently in. But everybody previously, again, I'm talking purely from a partner business perspective, was busy, and everybody is aware of the need to bring new partners in, specifically as new technologies emerge like Python and JavaScript and your Salesforces and Dynamics and Power Apps, and people start to look at other technologies as careers. So there is a huge drive from the council to push Claris to have a strategy when it comes to new developers and partners. We're also pushing Claris to make clear or to be more clear on the market position against other technologies. Claris currently is a workplace innovation platform, which works well, but that means it's not compared against things like Mendix, Power Apps, ServiceNow, other big players in the space, which sometimes hurts us in sales cycles. So again, it's just us trying to make sure that the market positioning is clear. And then the fourth one that we're trying to push for is that Claris understand that partners are separate than users, which means that potentially the message needs to be slightly different, or we need to understand slightly different things than end users need to. Again, purely from not a technical aspect, but from a business partner aspect as well. So we're pushing Claris to make sure that from a partner perspective, we're understanding the things that partners need to understand, so we can then reflect that to end users as well. So there are four things that we're trying to push or lobby on behalf of everybody else. To put it into context, we went through almost 200 things that we thought were important to all partners, but we only have the ear of Claris for a short period of time. So we tried to make sure what's as the most benefits, what we could focus on that's going to move the needle the most. And then secondly, from that, and again, I'll open it up to questions as soon as possible, because I'm sure people have lots of them. The second to that, the Claris COVID response team, which you've probably seen on Claris's website, are speaking about. I just wanted to run through that for a second. The Claris COVID response team is made up from a couple of different volunteers, myself, Mark Richmond from Skeleton Key, Molly Connolly from the US, the organization which is called Jointable, which was previously working on charitable projects, and Claris themselves. And in essence, what the Claris COVID response team are trying to do is trying to pair organizations which have a need but don't necessarily have funds or the ability to purchase licensing or a project at this moment in time, but could hugely benefit, specifically in relation to COVID-19, having a solution of some sort to solve a problem for them. So the Claris COVID response team are responsible for verifying that somebody's use case fits our criteria, and secondly, trying to then put that organization in contact with either companies or organizations or volunteers who are happy to give up some level of their service to try and help those organizations as well. So when you see probably on the blogs or articles people referencing the Claris COVID response team or Jointable, that's in essence what that team is doing. That's what we're doing. We're looking at one side of the coin, we've got organizations who are saying they need help. On the other side, we've got people who are saying, I'm happy to volunteer time to help. And all that response team is doing is trying to marry the two together in the most efficient way. And then make the introduction, make sure everybody's happy, then step away and let the talented customers and developers and partners do what they do best as well. So I've talked for far long enough. So I'll open up for questions. Again, I'll try to be as transparent as I can be, but just be aware, obviously, not everything I can divulge on the call.
Right, who's got questions?
If anyone's got a question, raise your hand. I'll unmute and then talk, and we'll try and find you. So I've got one question. The COVID response side of stuff, Jordan, sure. Is that something that any developer can be part of and help out, or is that, or am I misunderstanding its interpretation of what its use is?
No, there is. So there is a form that you can access through the blog on the Claris website that will give you a form to Jointable. All you need to do is give your name and how many hours you're able to commit to helping. And then that just goes into the pot of the repository, and then based on the organization, the use case, the person's experience, the location, time zone, language, then people get married up. But yeah, it could be anybody. I mean, and it can be any skill set as well. We're currently struggling to find people who've got an experience in documentation writing or training guide writing. There are lots of apps that are being built, but in order to share them to more people, the documentation needs to be written for them as well. So it can only be from documentation, sorry, to testing, to actually the building as well. So in essence, to volunteer, it is just go online, fill in the form, and then just wait for a request to come through. And again, it's not mandatory. It's a conversation that says, Gary, if something's come across, would you? This is the requirements that we've got. Would you be happy to engage with this organization?
Cool, makes sense.
Jordan, can you give an idea of the type of organizations that apply for the grant and what kind of apps they are looking for? I'm just
to be honest, there's a broad range. There's a broad range from again, to be clear as well, to manage expectation. There aren't tens or hundreds or thousands of these requests coming through. There are a handful that come across our desks. But in essence, some are very large organizations, but the typical Claris customer, there might be a large organization that have a small problem that needs to be solved. One More Thing did a great work with another firm to build a triaging system on the iPad, so that doctors in a hospital could make a triaging decision of whether what action should be taken if the patient's given up a COVID symptoms or not. There was another one of the partners in the States had built like a a donation, an equipment donation tracker, where a local charity could track that somebody's donated, whether it's drinks, food, PPE equipment, masks, gloves, and they could say they've just given 20 of those out to this hospital. So basic stock in and out system. So again, yeah, to be honest, we're trying to set expectation with the organizations that somebody isn't going to rebuild Facebook for you in the next 2 weeks to solve the problem. To be frank, they're all usually smallish tactical solutions that could have an impact. What we're also after as well, if anybody does have a solution that you think could be a benefit, you can also submit that solution as well. When we say submit the solution, you don't have to give a full access copy with a username and password. It's just basically holding your hand up to saying, I've got something that might help. Perhaps you want that on your list so you can refer people to that use case. We do that as well in terms of saying this partner, this developer has an app that we think you could help. Go and speak to them to see how to gain access to the app, or if you can, or what the agreement is between yourselves as well.
So these are examples of organizations that directly work with COVID patients or indirectly work with it. Are there any proposals coming in for like schools that will have to pivot to teach from home, nonprofits that suddenly are not in the office anymore? Are those
Yeah, it is. As far as I'm aware, that I haven't seen any education come in, but there are the lot of the non-for-profits that are being impacted by COVID are currently going through like spikes of requests. So one organization there were 5 people until about 6 weeks ago, and now they've had like 500 people volunteer, and now they're just struggling to work out how to onboard those people, how to capture the It's the most simple problems that probably we come across on a daily basis. But obviously, they've just gone through this huge trajectory of again, there were 1 to 2 people sat in their garage for the last 2 years who've been doing things, and now all of a sudden they're trying to manage 1,000 people, all trying to submit requests into them, or passports or proof of ID and things like that, all the way up to some people have built systems so patients or nurses or doctors can text family members when on progress updates and things like that. So again, it's a broad range, but everything's related to the COVID response.
And those are considered as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else got any questions on that? We can be fairly relaxed about the end timing, but I'd like to vaguely keep it roughly on time if we can. Okay. Any more? If you do, just put them in the chat at the side, and I'm sure they get answered.
Good.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Just say it was a good update.
Cool. Thanks. And as well, like I'm more than happy to circulate my details. I've been given the mantle to chair the council for the next couple of years, actually. So hopefully my intention is that you'll see a lot more transparency, which we're trying to work out, obviously, how do we share information to all partners, which is difficult, and get feedback. But I'll make sure that Gary, however you're going to circulate, everybody's got access to my direct line or email address just to share anything. And honestly, we are interested in hearing things that people are thinking should be happening. Again, I can't. We have no real authority, just to make clear as well. Think of us more like a lobbying committee. We can only express opinion as strongly as we possibly can. But I'm happy to share my details, and please just feel free to reach out if you think or spot anything, or think something should be raised higher up and you can't seem to get the ear of somebody that you would want.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jordan. That's really useful.
Cheers, Jordan. Thanks, man.
Nice comment, Clive. Okay, next on the agenda is script to set any field to empty. This was prompted by one of our members who is someone who never used FileMaker as a developer, but has used it for his own purposes. So he is a developer in my book. And he's written some very nice apps to track mainly his cycling. He does a lot of cycling. He's retired now, but does an awful lot of cycling. And his apps were have been developed along those lines, amongst other things. So I think I like to have in these sessions something for everybody. So this is really for, well, there's two reasons for having this. One is to help people learn what they can and to ease them in gently to some of the techniques that developers use and don't use. And also, if anyone wants to jump in and say, hey, I do this a brilliant way, your chance to show off. So I'm going to kick it off by presenting my screen with a little demo file I put together over the weekend and today. And I hope it goes a bit better than my introduction. Let's just, I've got to change something there. And I will present the screen. Which is that one. Turn grid view off. Right, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Good. Okay, so the basic task is basically to set a field to empty. So I've done various ways of doing this. The most simple and obvious way, why is that giving me the spinning wheel of death? There we go, is to just empty it. So if we look on that, that's basically set field by name, the field. There's about 100 ways to do this. I'm sure there's more than I've thought of. But I've tried to put them in some sort of interesting progression, and it's really to kick off thoughts about different ways of doing it. So I'm going to now set the field from a repetition. So you notice in here I've got a repeating field. Do you remember those, everyone? No one ever uses them. It doesn't have to be a repeating field. It's just a different way. It's just something you can do just so they still work, really. So it does much the same thing. You can see a list of fonts and some emails, but not FileMaker. Okay. Can you not see that?
I'm seeing it fine. I'm seeing it absolutely fine, mate.
What, you're seeing this screen here that I'm moving about?
Yeah, the example file I can see.
Example file, okay.
I can see the example file too.
Yeah, it's all good, mate.
Okay, well, the majority of people seem to be seeing the example file, so that's good. Okay, so you could type anything in here so long as it's a field name. These are actually the field names, so let's try text field in there. Text field, actually no, yes, text field. That's the right spelling. So, bingo, field empties when you press the button. So all that's doing is, I'll show you the actual thing in a minute. It's just basically setting field from, it's picking up the data from the repetition. It says, set the field, again, it's doing it directly, but pick the data from there. You could also have it on the layout or off the layout. This needn't be on the layout, either of these. You could have it as a block of text. That's all that is. If I just go into layout mode for a moment, you will see that this is just a chunk of text, a block of text. And it's doing the same thing there. Let's just change that. Let's just switch something else in there. Let's call that text field. And hopefully if I've got this right, it will now do exactly the same from, let's repopulate those. Bingo, does the same thing there. There's just there's one of every sort of type of field in there. So this file will be available for whoever wants to play around with it. Another way of doing it would be to use a JSON text object. that's the JSON in here. So what I've done is I can put a text block with some JSON in it. There, just an ordinary text block, which is just, as you can see, just a piece of text there. And it clears out all of them because I set it to do all of them. And this uses exactly the same technique. I'll just show you the scripts that are used, which are only in this one, and obviously the reset all fields. Those are the scripts. So if you have a look at the file, you can see what's being used. What was I doing? Clear all fields. I was going to show you the scripts. Okay, scripts. So these are the technique scripts. That's the one that sets all of them. So it's slightly longer, but as you can see, it's not ridiculously long. And I've commented these fairly well, so hopefully you can see what's going on. Those of you are interested. This is the one that takes them from the JSON fields. And then there's a delete portal row script, which is incredibly simple, which I'm about to show you. So obviously, you want to be able to delete that record or that record or that record or whatever. So you can just click on that. It'll say, do you want to delete that record? No, and hopefully it won't. Or yes, and hopefully it will. Delete the first one. Yeah, create some more, play with. I think you get the idea. So that's just some of the ways you can do it. It varies from the really simple, set the field directly, set that field to double quotes, empty, or this field, or whatever. They all have varying degrees of advantages and disadvantages. Personally, my favorite would be set them from JSON. I'd like to hear other people's comments, so I'm going to shut up now and let everyone join in. I'm going to stop presenting this unless anyone wants me to keep it on there.
No, I think it's fine, mate. Stop presenting and see what anyone else has got questions on, if they've got any.
Okay. Right. Any questions?
So I got a question.
I think. Oh dear. No, I can't answer it.
No, you will be able to. I don't quite understand why or how you've put text out there. Presumably you've named it an object and you're just going through as a get value. Are you in the object? Does it work like that? I've never tried that.
Yes, it's a list. You just get the contents, get object attribute content, I think it is, or is it source? Okay. That looks like an interesting comment from John, but I can't read it just at the moment. I don't think I actually, yes, that's got a name. So that's an object name. It's a named object, the text. There's a technique that came from Matt Petrowski. Very useful technique. It really helps. It helps you see. I did it because you can see what's going on in the demo. Just helps you see.
Cool.
But you could do that for real. You could put it off to the side. So then as a developer, you could decide what fields you want to play with and so forth. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah. Nice, like it.
Do I see a comment from, I saw some comments in there. Here. Use the field name as a key in the JSON, then use the JSON as key to loop over. I think that's what I'm doing, isn't it? Pretty much, John. You probably didn't see the script for long enough. Yes, I agree with you entirely, John. I think that's what I was doing, if you look at the file itself. Anyone else? Anyone got some favorite techniques? Anyone do it another way or anything?
I had someone mention you can run execute SQL to write.
Oh yeah,
code. Yeah, that'll work as well. Yeah.
No, I was hoping someone would be wanting to show something off.
I think you've exhausted it, mate. I think you went over about 9 versions of it, so I think you've nailed it. Well done.
That was a question in the execute SQL. I was asking whether you could do it.
I would imagine that would work. I'm just trying to think. Has anyone got any views on that? Would it work? I think it would do. I think you can. Oh no, because execute SQL is only a poll, isn't it? So it's you can't set over SQL. You can't write data as SQL. So no, you can't.
Bummer.
So that's a pull request.
You could get
you can with the execute SQL in the base elements plugin. So you run an SQL query which can set data.
And is that
records, etc.
Is that pretty fast?
The only problem with that is the fact that you're going to need the base elements plugin to operate it. So if you're then starting to, well, I suppose you can perform scripts on server if you've got other options or other ways of doing that. And the concern you'll have is usability of that across a solution. If they haven't got the plugin, it won't work.
I'm just trying to find another way of doing search and replace. So if you're replacing a field content and it's polling or looping through, I don't know, a few thousand records, in SQL, it's a lot easier just to go and do it. And I didn't know whether there was a workaround that could we work in FileMaker using execute SQL.
Not in that respect, I wouldn't have thought.
No, I don't think so.
The only left field way you could do would be to do the to self-call the REST API.
Yeah, that brings us on to John's talk in a minute.
Good intro, well done, Jordan.
Jordan,
I'm here all evening.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments on the clearing fields? It's a sort of fairly common thing. Pretty basic, so I guess most of us here are fairly seasoned developers. No, if not, we'll move on to John and data logging, which I'm looking forward to. Everyone happy with that? John, do you want to take over?
Yes, we'll be checking that you can all see in here and all that kind of stuff. We need to click observe.
I'm sure you've been much more polished than I am. Turn off group view. Yep.
Okay. So you should see a white screen. Somebody text me if you can't. And Don stopped texting me during the presentation. So as you know, today it is May the 4th. So here is my homage to that. This company are brilliant at this kind of viral advertising. So anyway, let's get on to it. Data and event logging in FileMaker, and what could the data API do to help us? If you don't know me, I'm John Renfrew. As well as being a FileMaker developer, I have a piece of VAT bridging software. You can find me on Twitter and GitHub, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. So what kind of things am I talking about in terms of event or action logging? Well, obviously, the first one is logging errors. We can capture errors, and obviously, I hope as a developer we're doing good practice to capture errors. But the question is, we potentially need to be able to logging them, but then considering what do we do next once we've logged an error? But it's not just about the negative side, logging errors. There are many things that we might want to log that we can treat as successes. Things like what's happening in the loop. What's the result of a very long running script, something that takes 2 hours to run. If emails get sent by the system, well, of course we can capture the errors, but are we going to capture what was sent and to whom? File actions, if we're doing things like integrating with a scanner and automatically importing something so the user isn't in control of it, do we want to log that? And of course, we're all now subject to GDPR, and as a result, I think there's a lot of things that we should consider logging. Now, we can get certain things out of the system logs, but obviously somebody needs to get access to the server. There's a link there, which I'll copy into the chat later, of a clever little technique where you do re-login with some failed account, and that will write a line in the server log. We're not going to consider that. Now, the kinds of things we might be looking at when we're we're doing email logging. Obviously, we want to capture errors, things like 1505, 1506 errors, some SMTP failure, some of which do appear to be quite random. IT changed the password and forgot to tell you as a developer. It might be machine specific. Somebody's got a brand new machine with a new OS, doesn't work quite as well. And it's not unknown for a company in Redmond to do things called updates that break systems. So we want to log some of those things that are errors. But at the same time, I think we should be logging system-based emails that are successes. You send out an email at 6 o'clock on a Monday morning at the beginning of the week with a report on last week's sales. And on Tuesday afternoon, somebody phones up and says, sorry, I deleted it. Could you resend it? Well, clearly what you can't do is rerun the script which triggers sending the email, because on a day and a half later, the report is now out of date. And unless you've gone to the trouble of setting up a blind email box that you have to manage yourself, how could you go and resend the same email with the same attachment to somebody else, and is it worth it? And for GDPR, who's looked at a record, maybe that wasn't from HR but has permission in the system, if somebody changes their communications preferences, have we logged that, and when do we log it so that we don't get emails going, oh, I told you you weren't supposed to do that, kind of thing. If we've got files that have sensitive data in them, who took a download of the local copy of it, and why did they do it? We might want to log. And I think a big area is around deletion of records for GDPR. What records or what related records got deleted, so that if you get to the point where you have to restore from a backup, there's somewhere that you can go that also finds your list of files, your list of records that you need to delete to make sure that data doesn't kind of creep forward in a file. And have you stored that somewhere? So that's like a success type action. So let's look at kind of really quickly the journey of what we're doing with data logging. We'll start really simply. It's a file with one or more tables in it. May or may not be hosted. It doesn't need to be at this level. We decided we want to start logging some errors. So we just build another table into it. And the interface, the only thing we've got to worry about is some scripts. It may be triggered, or it may be from a button or something like that. But essentially, that's our interface to make it work. The kinds of issues that we might have to consider are, do we have to make that interaction off screen so that the user doesn't see something happening? And obviously, maybe a card window might later on have helped us with this. As we've just said, you can't use execute SQL because you can't insert into tables using this method. And something we're going to look at in a bit is, this is a synchronous process. You do X followed by Y followed by Z. So you don't get back control until you've written the log record. But that's the simplest case. But very soon, obviously, the minute you get into a multi-file system, almost certainly this is hosted now. So we've got tables in one or more files, and the log file is taken out and put into a separate, the log tables in a separate file. So we now have to manage scripts, but we're managing scripts in multiple places in each of the files that we want to talk to the log file and in the log file itself. But there's a number of other things we have to manage as well. The relationship between the file and the log file. We have to be able to talk from one to the other. We have to work out what happens about permissions. Does the permission set in the file allow you to write into the log file? And obviously we're managing scripts now in multiple places. So if we have to update something, we're running around like a little worker bee fixing things. And one of the issues we have to deal with it is the first time you write a record in the log file, it will open and it'll run the onOpen script. And that might be slow and the user might see it. And then it's always open, and even if you've hidden the window, which isn't wholly successful in FileMaker some of the time. But we do now get the introduction possibly of using perform script on server, PSOS, to be able to make this an asynchronous process, which could speed it up for us. So my kind of quickly my journey, again, I'll post a link to this file. In about 2015 sometime, Dan Smith posted a module on modularfilemaker.org, which I took, downloaded, started to look at, and his thing was, okay, let's look at 5 levels of logging in decreasing seriousness. Now, take a big JSON package of information about the system, the record, the user, and he'd created some custom functions to write the JSON because we didn't have it natively at the time. But we're just asking the question, who was doing what, where, why? What do we think the expected result was? What was the actual result? And were there any error codes generated? But for me, I also consider, well, what do you do after that? It's not just about logging the actual event. And maybe at the low level, there's nothing that we really need to do afterwards. It's so that we as a developer can look what happens in the loop. And in the middle, the error level there, maybe the FileMaker error code is telling us everything that we would need to know to do the investigation. After that, however, things start to get serious enough for us to consider, well, does somebody need to be notified that this has happened? And particularly, if you've caught, we'll call it a level 1 error, this is the kind of serious error that's a system failure. And frankly, if somebody's in bed and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, they need to get out. So it's not just about doing a log. What hook do we need after it? Some kind of messaging system. I use Prowl a lot. You might use Slack, SMS, email, or preferably all of the above. And obviously we can send often with that an FMPRL that gets straight into the record that's caused the problem. So at the very least, you can start to look at what's gone wrong. Now, obviously, as we got native JSON functions, I went through, rewrote the custom functions, got rid of some of them to make it all FileMaker, and I tweaked a bit about what was reported. And at the same time, I was doing a bit of work with a company who had some extended requirements, which is where I got the idea of logging the server SMTP emails in a success log, file actions, like I say, on the basis of automated scanning, and GDPR actions. The reason for that is, and I think I've written about this a couple of times, we're saving sensitive emails as encrypted base64 text, so that file no longer exists. If you want to see it, we can decrypt it on the fly, put it into a web viewer, but therefore if you want to download a local copy, and there may be a reason for doing that, then we can kind of extract that for you. But in the process of doing that, we'll be asking why you want it, so we can log that. And obviously, card windows, which again I've written a number of times about, give us a great, very slick method of doing the interface. We still have as many things to kind of manage in terms of scripting. We still have a relationship issue, but maybe that's made a bit easier. But because of the way the card windows work, we can open a card window, do some action, and then close not just the window, but the file itself. So as far as the user is concerned, we're not leaving anything lying around kind of on the desktop. The process is still synchronous, one thing after another. And obviously, using a card window on the server doesn't work because there's no window for it to work from, and that's a bit of an issue. We can't just hand it all off to the server. And obviously, the issue with PSOS is that if you're doing high-level kind of frequent logging, the load on the server, so every time you spin up a PSOS session, it's a whole headless client with all the resources that that takes. So there's every chance that if you're doing like a frequent loop logging, you could be killing the server really quite quickly if you're not careful. And obviously, when you hand everything off to PSOS, you've got no real idea whether it worked or not. So it's no good if you don't know. Obviously, card windows, the advantage of card windows is that the relationship from the working file to the log file doesn't have to be a hard-coded link. It can be a double dollar variable path to that. So when you need it, you set that variable to be a path, and then you have a location for the file to work in. You can't change that in the course of a session. To reset it, you have to close FileMaker down and restart. But what it does give you the opportunity to test all of this in a dev environment by having a link to that. And then the minute you've finished, change the path. And as soon as the client gets in and starts using it, they're logging it in a real system. And for me, the great thing about card windows is they can be invisible to the user with the idea that a file can close itself. Okay, so quiz time. clearly this isn't going to work because it's just not going to work. But just for a second, what are all the ways that you can think of to create a new record in FileMaker? Okay, creating a new record in FileMaker. So from the menu, via a script, using a relationship where there's a create turned on. So you create a portal, you have this magic bottom row that you can click in and suddenly a record's created for you. You can create records by importing data. You can use connection technologies, ODBC, JDBC. You can use FileMaker's internal connections like custom web publishing, the XML gateway, or as discussed, we could go to a plugin which allows us the full SQL suite. Maybe that's not one that you really want to be managing, and it certainly doesn't work on FileMaker Go. And there's some chance that the one above might not be around forever, so let's not build systems based on that. Because what we have got since FileMaker 17, obviously, is the data API, which leads us to, okay, so we can see we've got something working. How might the data API help us? So we're still going to have to manage scripting, hasn't taken that away, but it does completely take away the issue with the relationship between the source file and the log file, and it moves where the permissions thing is working. So we just have to manage scripts and maybe custom functions in the files. It gets rid of there's even a file opening or closing. We've moved the permission into just a user and password to be able to log into the data API. Because the question is, how can it help us? Because the data API is not just a query mechanism to get some data from some records in FileMaker. It has a push mechanism as well. There is a method. If you read the documentation, there is a create record method. We pass, as part of the parameters, we pass some field data, the names of the fields and the data we want to push. We can also send a script pre-request, a script pre-sort in there with parameters for each one of them. The whole thing, however, is we don't get a choice of whether or not we wait for the result. It is synchronous. But as well as the create method, create record method, well, just like as a replacement for the XML gateway version, we can create using a script. We can just literally run a script with a parameter, and the purpose of that script is to create a record. There are some limitations to that, and that's partly because the parameter that we're sending is in the URL, and there is a limit on Windows, definitely, to somewhere around 30,000 characters, as I'm aware. But the URL might look something like in the middle of the screen, your server /FMI, replace those variables with your names, question mark, script.param, and then a URL encoded parameter. And that's obviously how the parameter can bloat over time, because spaces and slashes have to be URL encoded, so one character turns into 3. But you can just run the script in the first place, send it a parameter, and from then on it acts as if it's PSOS. And there's a little spoiler there for something that we might be doing in a bit. And the question that you're all going to go is, doesn't that kill my data API limit? The data API only measures data going out. It does not measure data going in. Doesn't measure data going in. So 3 calls to log on to the data API, send a script, get a response, log off, generates from Postman 3 responses of that size, 1684 bytes in total. For each user, they have a 2 gigabyte allowance per month, which turns into that large number. Divide that by 1684, divide by 365 days, divide by 24 hours, divide by 60. Suddenly, you have an average of 29.11 calls of that size per user every single minute. I might be suggesting that if a user in your system is generating an error every 2 seconds, every day of the year, 24 hours a day, you've got a different kind of problem, not a logging problem. If, however, you do want to push really vast quantities of data, and this is a whole separate presentation that I'm not giving, but is absolutely amazing. Download the video from Jesse Barnum's DevCon the other year. I have all of this working using Amazon AWS services. Kinesis, you can just chuck loads of data at, so a big block of JSON as fast as you possibly can. It will then store a digest of the information, either every however many seconds you determine or however many megabytes you get to, in one of your S3 buckets as a gzip file. Athena is a completely different service that will allow you to run a SQL query on the plain text that's inside that file. Essentially, behind the scenes, it generates a table in Hadoop to query. But what you get back is potentially a CSV file. So you select everything from everything in there. So you could be pushing data for several hours, just do a SQL query, say, give me everything back as a CSV file. It ends up in an S3 bucket, which you can download automatically as well, and start analyzing in FileMaker. Obviously, the way that AWS works is they've worked out how to charge you a little tiny bit of money for everything that you do. So everywhere there's a red triangle, there's a little cost associated with that. It's tiny, but if you just wanted to do this for 1 day, 1 week, that's all you'd pay for. Separate presentation, but it's amazing. So, next question. How can you transfer a lot of data out of the data API without eating our alliance? Read down the screen. Container fields are not counted, and the reason they're not counted is because they're not transferred as containers. But if, for example, the length of your script parameter is approaching the limit, you can create a record in we'll call it an attachments table. If you use the text encode function on a big block of text, what it brings you back is a file. In the help, text encode brings back container data. So you could create 60 million characters, turn it into a file. When you ask for the record, so let's send a file name and the layout and the record ID and query that, you'll get back, where there's a container, what you'll get back is a session-based URL to the container, looking something like that line in the middle. Okay. Potentially you need a file name because the file will be called whatever the session token is. And obviously you can use the rename in the container base64 dance, should we say. And then the question is, well, now you can pull it as an insert from URL. It doesn't cost you anything against your data API limit. And then we can process it. We can export, use the new file functions. You can just read it as if you know it's a block of text. And maybe you can delete that original attachment record. Couple of other quick little things about the data API. Not documented in the middle of FileMaker 18. It only came along not in the first version of Server. You can now validate a token using a URL at the top there. All you need to send in the authorization as a bearer and the token, and you'll get back an effectively empty message, hopefully with a 0 code, meaning there's no error. It's 503 bytes against the method that I was using to check that the server worked was there, which is using the metadata endpoint. Or if the token is no longer valid, you'll get back a slightly bigger message with a 952 error. It is true, however, that in Server 18.03, although the tokens are supposed to expire 15 minutes after they're created or 15 minutes after the last time they were used, that in Server 18.03, in fact, they just expire after 15 minutes. Go away and update your server to 18.04, and that will fix the behavior. Another little quick thing for you to think about on your own. The data API works on the committed record. It works on the server on the committed record. Execute SQL is a way of querying the record. If you're in a current record and it's not in a saved state and you're in a field, it will give you back the current uncommitted state. If you do it locally, that will give you the committed state if you run it on server. I wrote a while function as an experiment to kind of go, what fields are on the layout? Can I grab all the data that's in there? And the reason for doing that is, if we're being intentional about editing a record in a card window, we'll grab the initial state of the record on the way in and store it somewhere so we can compare it later. But if something fails and that wasn't part of the logic, we might need to also report what was the original state of the record and what does it look like now before it's committed. Data API will work on the committed record. And there is a watch this space about maybe how to get stuff locally in a short while. So enough of me, because you also want to see a bit of goodies as well, don't you? So let's get out of that and let's switch to FileMaker, and we'll jump straight to the end. Okay, just orientate yourself around. This is a log file, and just as a quick for example, I have recorded a level 1 error, and we've just got a massive field with a load of JSON in that's at least prettied so that we can read it, but it's not that easy to work with, and because I've got spelling on, everything's red and underlined. But if you take JSON and throw it at a web viewer, at any browser, it knows exactly what to do with it. So let's look at a web version of the same thing, okay? Because it's got things in it that will nest, we can close or open the nest. So that bit of tech that's in there is in Dan's example file. To be fair, I have fiddled around with the CSS quite a lot and a few other parts, but there is a version of it. But also, how cool is this? You can search within the JSON and find all its locations of that. And if I search for the word test, it's not just in the keys, but it's also within the data. The data itself is color coded. So if it's a number, it's red. If it's text, it's blue. And if I can find one, if it's empty, if it's a null, it's grayed out. So that's so I've got a level 1. I've just got an example of a level 2. So I've done a bit of color coding in there because I want to see, they want them to stand out a bit. Level 2 has a different set of things that I'm capturing, isn't quite as long. Level 3 is literally I'm just capturing a message and an error code because that's all I really want to see. And the same is true for there appears to be more in there, but I want to have a bit of information to help me work through a loop. Just done some really quick show me all the 1s, show me all the 2s. You can write all of this stuff yourself. Show me everything else that's happened in the last 24 hours. Let's show me everything. And we've got a bit of color coding going on here, which you'll see around how frequently this is. I've chosen to sort them with the most recent at the bottom, which may not work quite so well for the purpose of demo. But within this file, we are storing 4 different types of logs. We've got an error log, that's that one. We've also got a mail log, which is literally just, it's a very simple thing. It's only ever a level 3. Let me show you something on that in a minute. And I've got a file log, which is literally just, so it's a different set of information here. I just want to know what the file was, where it ended up, what script ran really quickly and from which file. Obviously, I can then just quickly zoom in and see what's going on. And finally, I've got a GDPR log. This is a bit different because unlike the error levels, I want to know the actions. So all the files that were viewed, all the files that were deleted, all the files that were downloaded. And also here, this is capturing the persistent ID of the machine. So show me everything that this particular machine has done over time. So let's just kind of zoom to that. So we kind of almost certainly we're going to want to see this in operation. So over here I have a really quick file just with some simple test scripts which are literally just triggering the error to make sure that it can happen. So let's trigger off a level 5 error. and hopefully you'll go, wow, that works. But you'd kind of expect it to, wouldn't you? I would hope. Let's trigger a level 4, level 3, level 2, level 1. And there we go. So I haven't got it wired up because I can't, with this Mac, I can't easily share my screen, but I would normally with a level 1, I'd prowl myself. So I got an error message happening there. So let's look at the GDPR, very similar kind of thing. Somebody's viewed a file. Here's a dialogue with some rough timings about how long this is taking. The whole thing is taking 537 milliseconds to run everything. So it's like less than half a second to get everything done. Those intermediate timings are just the various steps because I'm doing 3 things: logging on, running a script, logging off. And the reason for doing the logging off is there is a hard limit of 500 data API sessions, and you just want to clean up after yourself after you've done it. So click download. That's all pretty much working the same within a couple of milliseconds. And here you go. We've got a couple of new things added to there. Then when it came to the mail, so instead of just kind of logging, okay, I've logged something about a mail, I wanted to consider the position of, let me just delete that. Sorry, delete, not sort, delete those. Okay, so this demonstrates, for those that haven't done it, this button here will put some text into there, read the text, and use the text encode to turn it into a file. Okay, that text is now inside that file. But let's go to, well, let's do it with the next record. There's a file that's an attachment to this mail, and as well as just storing in the log the details about who it was sent to, what the message was, I want that file to go with it as well. So I'm going to run this script here. That's done. In here, the very last message will contain the same, whoop, whoop, there we go, the same file. I'm not going to download them and demo it. What this is doing is, it's using this bit here. So I added to the JSON around that I'm trying to capture a callback parameter. I could delete that as part of setting the field. And this says, in that other file over there, on that layout, on that record, there is a file called this. And once, what the script does is it makes the record in the log file, and then it immediately reads the JSON and says, oh, if there's a callback, so this log file calls back using the data API to this record, it gets the streaming URL for the file, and then just says, okay, insert that into there as the file. And then you're all going to go. So what about the position where actually we've got multiple files attached here? And I am, in fact, using repeating containers here in this attachment file because it's the quickest and simplest way to do it. So I'm just going to click the script which creates a log record with the attachments. If I go to the next log record, it's transferred, in this case, there may be a tiny scripting thing that's supposed to obviously not appear. It's because this is a 0-based array. But it's transferred multiple attachments. And what it's done is created the record here, really simple call to the data API, made the data API trigger a script, which then says, oh, go backwards. I know you've got some stuff for me over there, pull it back. And the cost of doing that, again, is literally just the OK messages. It's not the files. So that's me for the moment. I need to get back to there and do that. And now we'll go, any questions? And obviously I haven't been watching the chat while this has been happening because I've been doing it full screen. So let's go.
Very good, John. Impressive. Nice.
So it might have been a bit fast. There's a lot to say, so that's me, as you know.
Jill asked about the GDPR stuff, and one thing I wanted to add to that is Jill was saying about why you track for deletions. Now, one of the reasons that I know we certainly would look at that is the fact that, I don't know whether everyone knows, but with GDPR, if you then do a backup restore, the company is duty bound to then go back and delete the records that you have to for compliance. So tracking what was deleted after that date and time, you then can go back and delete those. So if there was a compliance issue where you had to delete 50 records, and then your server crashed that evening, you as IT go back in and go, I'm going to do a restore, you are duty bound as a client or as a company to go back and delete those subsequent records that you deleted earlier in the day. If you didn't, the company is liable for not deleting those records, just to let you know. So that's one of the reasons why you should track your deletions if you need to from security point of view when it comes to emails and personal information. So.
Don's got a question.
Just a comment on the GDPR. There are some instances where, in fact, that you are entitled to retain or required to retain the data, but not make it available for commercial use.
Correct. So it's in the use of your business. Yes, absolutely. You have the right. It's in relation to you running your business. If it's related to an order or something, then yes, you can.
But even on the extent of, for example, if someone says to me, "You cannot use that mobile phone number again. You will not contact me on that mobile phone number again. Remove it from your records." You have to know to block that mobile phone number, so you have to keep it in the system to stop it being used, and you're entitled to do that. So there are good reasons why you don't actually want to destroy data from GDPR. There are good reasons to destroy data for GDPR, but there are good reasons not to.
Absolutely. Anyone else got a question?
John, thank you very much for that. You had something very cool going on showing JSON in a web viewer where it was searchable. Could you just show us layout view so we can see what the code is? You made it sound very simple.
It is.
Well, that is fascinating.
As promised, so let me just, in the chat, this is Dom's module, okay? Go and download the module because it's working in there, okay? It does use a JavaScript library. Let me see if I can just go into layout mode here a second, and I'll need to just go into presenter mode again. Give me 1 second. Present now. Present my entire screen. Click allow. Okay, so that's the web viewer code. Okay, and to the right hand side there are 3 text fields. There's a JavaScript that's driving the web viewer. There's a CSS that's styling it, and there's a bit of JavaScript which allows the search to happen. Okay, but those are in the demo file. So all it's doing is referencing. It's referencing in the JavaScript that it's doing that. So Matt Petrowski trick, here's a text object called this using get layout object attribute. It's a named object and get the content of it and feed it in. So we're just building a bit of HTML. So there we go. Let's go back and look at it. That's all that's doing. So I'm taking that JSON. Okay. So we have attachment callback. Callback is a nested thing. There we go. The callback, because it's nested, has a plus next to it. Because the attachment is an array, it knows that that's more than one item, so that's also nested. Okay, and the search functionality is another little tiny bit of JavaScript that just says work through that, highlighting each instance of that. So let me stop presenting again.
That's great. Thank you very much.
But it literally, that part of it hasn't, no, that part of it is out of the modular FileMaker file. I have, like I say, I've fiddled around with CSS, but not a lot else. The JavaScript, obviously, I haven't played around with very much. I haven't played around with the right-hand half at all. Most of that's CSS to drive it. If you put a JSON file, get a piece of JSON, save it as a file.json, drag it onto a web viewer, web viewer will know what to do with it because that's where it comes from. So this is just a way of styling it. So there you go.
So the dragging a JSON file onto web viewer independent of us.
Missed that bit of scratchy.
You said drag a .json file onto the web viewer?
Yeah.
That's separate from what you've just shown, is it? Or is that using?
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, the issue is that web viewers know what to do with JSON. That's the underlying bit. So we've added a bit of JavaScript that adds the interactivity in the search, but it's not like trying to show a file it doesn't understand or show data it doesn't understand. There will be other ways to do that. As ever, this is a presentation designed to go, oh, there's an open window, wonder what else you could do, wonder what else would work. There are other people who've got other methods for unpacking the JSON for you. This is just a cool way to do it because it works on FileMaker Go. You know, you open the thing on an iPad, you can see it.
Excellent. More questions? No, you've stunned us all, I think, John.
I will make sure that Jill and Gary get a PDF copy of the presentation I gave, so you can just kind of work through some of it. There's a couple of links in there.
I'll put all this stuff up on the FMBug website. So everything, presenters actually, can you let me have what you can after the meeting, or Gary, and it'll go up on the website.
Who's next?
Next is Doug. If you're ready, Doug.
Yeah, cool. Sound okay?
Not gonna sleep. Sounds good.
Hey, thank you. First, thank you very much, John. That was really great, really interesting, and as always, inspirational. Over to you, Doug.
Cool. Cool, so I'm going to keep the video on the side. So good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Doug Wallis. I work for Claris, so I'm the bad guy. I'm part of what we call now the product marketing / sales engineer / something else team. Basically, we try to be salespeople as well as techie guys and work on product marketing to actually get a better vision of what we do to the market and to our developers. So I'm going to talk about FileMaker 19. I think that most of you probably have seen the preview webinar that we did a couple of weeks ago. This is basically the same slide deck. I'm going to do some demos at the end of some of the stuff that we're working on. One of the things that we sort of came on doing all the time is actually throwing out the same message again and again and again so that everyone gets it. But one of the big differences that we are doing now at Claris, partly with FileMaker or Connect, is we want to make sure that basically our community is actually using the right tools for what they want to do. And we want to basically make sure that you understand how to use them so that you can actually use them in your solution. So the one thing that basically John was talking about, like sort of JavaScript, one of our big features basically that we're going to basically talk about in 19 and increase the development in 20 and the next version is to have really decided that Claris FileMaker can integrate quite easily with the system, and it's quite easy for you to integrate stuff that you've been trying to actually get working in FileMaker for like 20 years and find a way to be able to actually do it really quickly. So one of the things that sadly is you can't do everything in FileMaker, even though people have been trying to. But there's one thing that's actually ideal is you can do a lot more stuff in JavaScript that you can do in FileMaker. So the idea is if we basically bring you better tools to do more amazing solutions, you're going to be able to actually develop quicker than before and make stuff that actually works better for your customer, or even internally for you. Is it going down? You can write stuff on the side. So quick one, basically, as it's not released yet, everything that I'm talking about is there's like an embargo. So if you're part of the ETS, if you have questions for the ETS, put it on the community. If you've got your preview because you are either FB or Claris partner member or FDS, then you'll have been sort of playing with it. But as we haven't released it for the time being, don't talk about it or don't do anything on Twitter and stuff like that. So agenda is going through to a bit like the product vision that we have, an overview of 19, a couple of stuff that we're putting into deprecated or completely being removed, and then I'll do some demos, and then we're going to in the Q&A. So vision of the company has been that for two years now. The idea is we make powerful technologies available to everyone. A couple of stuff that we've actually changed, so top bar, custom apps, that hasn't really changed. The one thing we've changed is around available is the idea of cloud smart. Another thing that we've realized that a lot of people are actually asking us to have more smart function in FileMaker, but so that they can be really easy to actually implement. Stuff like Siri, stuff like CoreML, stuff like NFC, and I'll do some demos afterward, are some of the asks that we've had in the community. And one of the new mention is one of the things we're really going to do this year is actually work with you, the community out there, to really help you modernize what you've done, and so that your customers will actually, on the long run, know that they can actually do updates to their systems and their apps, and it's going to work better for them. So obviously, COVID has changed the way that people will work in the future. The COVID-19 has actually sort of shown us a couple of examples of stuff that before people were like, this is no way I'm doing it because I'll do it 5 years down the road. Whereas now they are saying is actually, that's why we need to do it now. We need to do it now. We had a request over the weekend from a company in Belgium where they have to set up a system for home care residents. It's something that maybe they've planned to do over the next 5, 6, 10 years, whereas now they have to do it straight away. So the idea is all around sort of modernizing what people used to do on paper, but really do it now with FileMaker. So the platform is basically the two that you hopefully using now is Claris FileMaker and Claris Connect. And then underneath that, what we call is now Claris Core, which shows all around the community, the security teams, the marketplace, and all of that actually works together. So part of what you do as a community is part of Claris Core. And it's one of the elements that actually makes us really powerful versus the competitors is we have this massive community that's been there for a very long time, that is really good at what they do, and is going to help basically the whole platform work forward. So obviously, basically, as you might have seen from some of the stuff that Brad has been saying over the last couple of months since he's been there, we've moved into a different way of actually launching product. So previously, we were really into doing every May, or before that, even though like every 18 months, there was a release of FileMaker. The idea now is there's no point in us waiting to bring a new feature to the product if it's done now and wait for next May. So if we do create a new feature between the month of September, October, there is no need for us to wait till May next year to bring it out. If we know it works now, let's bring it out now. And so across the board, this is basically how it works now. So we had the cloud in the US coming out in October last year. We had Connect coming out in March this year. Because it's all cloud-based, we can do more changes to the way it works. So you'll see some emails tomorrow. Some of the partners have actually got it today. But basically, we are reworking on pricing and who can actually get a better deal on Connect for the whole community. We'll have FileMaker launching this month, FileMaker 19, and then we'll have sort of mini updates throughout the years of around Claris, FileMaker, Claris Connect, and potentially other products. And so the focus that we have is around cloud, which is really around Claris Connect, a bit less on FileMaker Cloud currently, because we've seen that what we've built, even though it's actually quite good for new customers, we do realize that for all the customers that have had solution working for 10 years in a local environment and put it on the cloud, actually might sometimes not really work. but we've actually bringing a version of FileMaker server where you'll be able to actually pretty much create your own cloud in an easy way. Integration focus is giving you the option to have more tools from the outside used within FileMaker to make it easier for you to do better stuff. Like people have been asking for, since I've actually done FileMaker, how do you actually have a calendar working properly in FileMaker? But it's a real bugger to actually build it. I mean, if you ask any of the developers that created a calendar app for FileMaker and they're resetting it, they have teams of, I don't know, 4 or 5 guys working on it on a daily basis because it is really hard to actually build to actually sort of work properly. But we know that on website, you have really nice, powerful calendar apps actually working. So the idea is, if I can just basically grab the HTML code and the JavaScript from this website and then put it in my FileMaker solution, and then use a script step to actually get the data to talk back between JavaScript and FileMaker, then you can actually have great integration done in an easy way. Mobile and web, we are working quite a bit on making mobile more user-friendly. One of the things that you might have seen is we are working on creating a web authoring tool so that you could do FileMaker layouts and scripts directly into your web browser. So obviously that has some strain into how we do stuff with the Draco engine. So we're working on it, but hopefully we'll have that out in a couple of years. And then emerging tech is everything around core ML, AI, and stuff like that. And I'll do some demos after that. So same sort of language. We sort of idea is it's low code or even pro code if you want to call it. But the idea is you can do it faster and smarter than before. So Todd Geist, everyone knows him. He's been working really closely with us, especially on the JavaScript side of it. And for him, it really basically makes a lot of changes because having this better integration of JavaScript will actually make it better for everyone. So this idea of basically of having what we call plug and play authoring is the idea that you'll be able to actually have add-ons within FileMaker that you could basically from your FileMaker IDE drag onto your screen, and it will create basically everything you need to actually get it to work. So for like calendar, you would basically drag the calendar add-on on your layout, and it would create the scripts, create the layouts, create the relation. But what we had to build in the background is if you decide to actually remove these add-ons from your systems, you have to be able to actually remove everything that was around it. So the scripts actually went along with it, the tables, the relation, table crunch, and stuff like that. So this is one of the steps that we're still working on, because at first we thought it was going to be quite easy to be able to do it, but this versioning system that we haven't really got in our system means that it's going to be harder for the add-ons to work. But you'll be able to actually pretty much insert any type of JavaScript into your solution and then play with it with your tables that you already created. So this is basically one quick example. When I've gone through the slide, I'll do some demos so that you can see how it works real live. So this is just basically using a normal calendar, and then you can have any type of charts that you can't really do currently using the chart engine that we have. But using JavaScript, it's a lot easier to do. So we're hoping that basically it's going to make a big difference, but we know that not everyone knows about JavaScript, not everyone's been using it. And so one of the things that we're going to try to do is, on our side, part of the Claris team and with partners actually know how to do it, is actually show you how and show you the best way to get into this new world. Because once you pick it up, and it's not actually that hard, because a lot of the time you're not actually recreating the web pages and stuff like that. You're basically just taking text from somewhere and then putting it into your system, do a couple of scripts, and then you can actually get it to working together. So we're hoping that this is going to make you better developers in the long run, but we know there's going to be like a learning curve. And the idea that we're working on is to make sure that you actually go through this process in an easier way as possible. So you can see you got Todd, you got the class, all the big guys basically have been on there. They quite like it. We've used them quite a lot to do some of the stuff in the background. So if you talk to them, they'll be even more happy than me that talk about it. The other stuff that we brought on is all the stuff about AI, because we know that basically there's a lot of people wanting to be able to use it. It's one of the core message that Apple is putting through developers. So they've built like an ML sanction in developer website. They are really trying to get people to actually understand how it works, but they don't want to basically being left to just big companies or very techie guys or nerds or geeks. They are looking to basically get people from every department to actually start thinking, if AI can actually help me in my system, then I should be using it. So currently, you've heard about the big companies where they use AI to do stuff. But in a small solution, you could actually have a model doing some stuff for you, and it doesn't have to be the biggest model in the planet. If it works properly for you, then you should be using it. And we've done stuff like NFC and Siri shortcuts, and then demo, you'll see more. So basically, Core ML, all we've done is reading, basically using the model to look at an image or text and then give you some answer back. We've done the same for NFC. It's just about reading. So we haven't built the creating part of it. So you won't be able to actually write NFC data into NFC tags. You'll just be able to read it. But there's so many tools out there that actually can write into NFC tags that we thought, what's the point of actually us doing it in FileMaker? So it's really easy to go. You've got a script steps for the NFC reading. Same for Core ML. There's one script steps. And it's quite easy to set it up, and I'll show afterwards. Siri, same again. It's something that we really want to push forward. Obviously, it's something that Apple really likes, and the new version of 13.4 has a better way of actually sort of dealing with Siri. So hopefully you'll be able to actually play with that in your system. So we've really sort of, this AI section is something we really like, because I think it's going to help us versus competitors on the market. Oops, should go the other way. And if you talk to Wim as well, he's been working on that and he actually likes it quite a lot. So the other stuff that we've done is we're working on is around the cloud section. And so when we talk about cloud, it's pretty much cloud and everything around the web. So on the next version, if you have FileMaker Cloud, you'll be able to actually directly create a file on the cloud without having to create locally and then set up the accounts, uploading it to the cloud, and doing all the stuff that's really boring. The idea that straight away you could actually do it. And we're trying to make the sharing a lot easier so that if you want to invite your user to a file, it's going to be easier to actually go through the process. The other stuff that we've added is the FileMaker Web Direct card inside browsers. So it took us quite a lot of time to actually be able to do it. One of the issues that we had is the WebKit that was being used on the old version of Windows was making it very clunky. Since then, Microsoft has been able to actually update the WebKit system that you use. So it's part of Edge. But be able to actually do that, it means that we have to drop completely support for Windows 7. So thankfully, Microsoft now is saying that Windows 7 should not be used, and so we've decided to drop the support for Microsoft 7, Windows 7, and it got this opportunity for us to be able to actually bring WebDirect, a car window in WebDirect. So it's going to help quite a lot of people because we've been able to actually work on it properly, and so when you have multiple windows opening up or car window, it's not basically going to count multiple user or licensing, or if you have concurrencies. So we've done a lot of work in the background to make sure that it works properly. In terms of the innovation, so the idea is, as I was saying, is to actually innovate quicker and bring in new features when we've actually created them. So stuff like NFC, it's been working for basically about a year now. But we had to wait for the launch of 19 to actually bring in, which is actually quite stupid because no one's been working really on it for about a year internally. And so when we bring it out, the engineers have to go back into it. QA has to go back into it and verify it's still working properly. So we've actually doubled on the work. And then since the time we finished it and until now, we could have seen that the market was going somewhere else. But because we haven't really worked on it, because we said it's done, we haven't done anything. So the idea is to, depending on what the community is asking us and what we see from the market, is bring new stuff when we actually build it. So one of the things that you'll see is we'll bring a FileMaker server for Linux version in with the next release. But because we've actually started the work quite recently on this version, we're not going to have everything coming out at first. And so the two options that we had is to say is we wait for FileMaker server for Linux to be with complete parity with FileMaker server for Mac and for Windows, which means it could take us 5 months, 6, it could take more. With COVID, we don't really sure. So the idea says, is there a way for us to bring a version of server for Linux with maybe not all the features, but something that basically gives you about 80% of what it can do. And then every month or so, when we have a new feature working properly, we just give you basically an updater, and then you run that and you have a new feature. And this is what we're going to do. So basically, currently, it's under ETS. I think there might be some of you on the call that have actually got it. And then we'll release it with the next version of FileMaker. And then we'll have new features or added features coming out throughout the summer. The idea was to actually have parity before we got to Engage. But now as Engage is going to be online, we might actually have more people to work on it, and we might actually bring it earlier than expected. And so it's going to be supported for CentOS version 7 at first, because that's what we use for FileMaker Cloud. It's the release that we actually know the best internally. And so in terms of support, because we didn't actually want to have our support team overwhelmed with a lot of questions in various versions, we decided to let's just go for one and just basically says, if you use that one, we can give you support. Anything else, we're not going to be basically able to actually help you that much. And so our support team, they know Mac, they know Windows. Most of them have never worked with Linux. So we have to get them to actually know the basic of Linux and be able to actually do support to our customers. We don't know how many people are going to be using Linux, but because we have more than 50,000 customers around the planet, and I don't know how many sort of users, if everyone wants to move to Linux, we have to actually have a supporting people to actually manage that. So we had to actually do it in steps, just to make sure that it works for everyone. And then the web authoring, so it's not going to come out for 19, but we are working on it so that eventually this summer we could have a first iteration of it coming out, and so that you can actually play with it. So this is a screenshot of what it's going to look like. So basically the idea is to bring everything that you have in your normal FileMaker Pro, but using responsive design and a bit of sort of AI in the background, is to be sort of clever, first of all, but actually instead, especially around the inspector. So the inspector currently is static. It shows you everything that you can do in FileMaker, and depending on the type of object you click into, it's going to either tell grey out if you can't use it, but sometimes it doesn't really explain what you can do with it. And the idea is because everything is web-based and you have a Node.js server in the background, we can have a clever inspector. The reason we're basically working quite a bit on this in the web is once we actually know how it works properly on the web, then we can bring it down to the client. So the idea is to potentially have the same clever inspector inside FileMaker Pro. So when you click on object in FileMaker Pro, it will only give you the options that you can do, depending on the field type and stuff like that, versus for the time being giving you everything. So for you, seasoned developer, you are used to the inspector and you know your way around it. But we have new users, and when we have new users, they get lost really quickly. And one of the big sort of aim that we wanted is basically increase the amount of new users, but they have to actually sort of understand when you first start using FileMaker to actually feel the love from the community and actually start liking FileMaker for what it is, and not being sort of going to this area going, actually, I can't do this because I don't understand what it does, and I've got to go through and do a lot of huge amount of training, and I don't understand, I haven't got the time. And then when they get to a partner, they go, yeah, but this guy, he's going to basically bill me a huge amount of money, and I've been told that FileMaker is really easy to use. So we're trying to sort of basically get the source message properly, so that new users actually get and understand what they can do. And once they actually know that, they go, well, actually, this is too much work for me, they go to partners, developers, and they go, okay, I understand how FileMaker works. I love it. I just know that I haven't got the time to do it because I've got to run a business. So can you actually build this for me? But because I know how it works, when I see what you've done, I'm going to be able to actually understand that. And this is going to get the all approval a lot quicker and the buying from then a lot quicker. So this will be coming out. I'm hoping that we'll probably have a version around the summer, or maybe it will be in the fall, depending on how we go. So the innovation is, and as if you've talked to Srini, whether it's a DevCon on the phone, he wants to basically do everything now. So we're trying to sort of control him because he will basically just do everything now and launch everything now. So we've been able to actually sort of getting to actually sort of have a proper sort of timeline and not get the engineers completely overworked. And so we've been able to actually sort of get this system propped up. So we currently sort of based on the fact that we'll probably have a major release because we're still going to have sometimes to do sort of major releases, whether it's the security back end of the system or because we have so many features coming out, we'll just do it once. And then we're going to have summer ones. So Linux Server is one of the sort of first iteration of a scheduled sort of release. Claris Connect, because it's cloud-based, whenever we have something new, we can basically just release that. We're working on, in terms of messaging, basically maybe explain to you whenever we have new updates coming out, what they are and what you can do with it, so that you can start picking up on it. But that's basically where we want to get to. Marketplace, so if you're a Claris partner, that's something that we have redesigned. So there's a new marketplace called marketplace.claris.com. This is where we are seeing the most activity on our website. So people from the outside, they do a search on Google, they find information on the marketplace, they go, oh, I like it, and then they go to the website, the developer, they see the app, and they go, I'm just going to buy that. And so this is basically driving quite a bit of traffic to the website. So if you have solutions that you think that people would actually love, either to buy or just to play with it, send to us, and then we'll put it happily on the website. So the preview release for those who are FDS member or partners, you should have received it yesterday or can't remember. Today or yesterday, over the weekend anyway. Or if you haven't received it, it will be in the next few days. You'll get a copy of Pro for Mac or Windows and a copy of Server for Mac or Windows. Always the stuff that we like to remind people. So in terms of the operating system, and as you can see, it's not called FileMaker Pro Advanced. We went back to just FileMaker Pro because it was getting confusing. So now it's just FileMaker Pro, and that's it. So it's just for the latest version of the Mac, and for Windows, it's only 8 and 10. So anything to do with Windows 7, people will actually move away, and it's 64-bit only. For the server, the big stuff we have added is 2019, both the data center version and the standard version. So pretty much any hosting facilities could be used now to actually have the FileMaker server. And if you want to do like testing on Amazon, if you go for the, I think it's called the T2 Nano, which is one which is free of charge for 1 year, you can use their data center and use FileMaker server on that, and that would work properly. FileMaker is not the latest version, but 13.2, because currently there's no big changes. For Safari, it's for browser, so it's Safari, Edge Chromium, the new one, and Chrome. We've dropped IE because it was such a pain to support. And for the cloud, still the same, Safari, Edge, and Chrome. So deprecation runtime is definitely going. It's not there anymore. It's gone. So for those who are still doing stuff on runtimes and you thought you could get away with it, you can still create solution using FileMaker 8 Pro Advanced 18 for as long as Pro 18 Advanced is supported. So if you're still doing runtimes, you're going to have 2022. So you have about 2 years left to be able to do your stuff. We basically put into deprecation quite a few years ago. It was a real sort of problem for us to be able to actually give some of the new features in our system and keep that running in the background. But the idea is the way you could actually, especially more on the Mac, because now we've actually changed the way you actually install FileMaker Pro on your machine, we think there might be ways around it to if you want to create runtimes using FileMaker Pro. Peer-to-peer is deprecated, so it will allow you to do 5 connections. It's mainly for FileMaker development. Whether it's going to be deprecated for just one version or whether it's going to go before that, we don't know, but we are trying to actually retire that as quickly as we can. Currently, there isn't a plan to do the certification for 19 the way we've done it before. So we're looking at other systems to do it in a more in a clever way, so that you don't actually have to just work and learn stuff that you don't use. So we're trying to sort of revamp it in a different way, so it makes more sense for people to actually be able to actually want to do the certification. For those who are using FileMaker Cloud for AWS, so we are there won't be a version 19. We'll end the support in 1st January 2022. But as we've built this FileMaker server for Linux, you could actually recreate your own FileMaker Cloud for AWS with your version of FileMaker server for Linux on your own in an easier way than we currently have. FDS. So FDS, we are changing it. So it's not gone yet. You'll still have it for 19. So if you're paying for and you've got your renewal coming up, you'll still get your copy of FileMaker Server 19 for testing purposes. We are just revamping it so it's easier for new developers to go. Actually, instead of actually buying just FileMaker Pro in a box, I'm going to go for the FileMaker Developer. It's going to basically be the same amount as what you're currently paying for the full version. But if you're playing with it, it's a lot easier. And the idea is to give you, to put it around the whole platform. So it will change its name eventually to Claris Developer License. And the idea is to give you FileMaker Pro and Connect together and be able to actually get those two to work properly. Also, we're changing some of the SDKs. So in terms of the SDKs, before they were just for the FDS, now we're going to make it available for everyone. So the iOS app SDK, which is there to help you create standalone iOS app, will be able to everyone. The FileMaker data migration tool that we showed before by James, that's going to be able to everyone. And then there's a new tool that we've created, which is called the Fast Data Conversion Tool. After the launch, we'll do some more sort of targeted webinars where we'll just go through one new feature. The Fast Data one is pretty much the same as the data migration tool, but instead of actually moving the data from one file to another one, you actually are moving your updating layout, scripts, table in one file. So the data stays in the same one, and you're updating your scripts, your layout, and stuff like that on your data file. So it's the opposite of data migration tool. The idea, it pretty much does the same, but if you have very big solutions with a huge amount of data and you don't want to move the record ID or the modification ID or stuff like that, then it might actually work better that way. So support policy, boring stuff, but the idea is as we're going to basically just be supporting the latest 2 version. So if you're using 16 or 17, just make sure by the September of this year, you've actually moved to 18 or 19. And so we'll now support version for 2 years. And after 2 years, you have a new one. But by the time that we get to FileMaker 20, or if we ever get to FileMaker 20, and before that, maybe we'll actually change the name to something that hasn't got a date that is, or a number that's a year less than the date of where we are. It will be easier for updates, and we're trying to figure out whether we can actually do it similar to sort of the way that Apple does it in terms of the iOS and the macOS updates. So this is the list of new features. I'm going to go through and shoot 2 ones that I did some stuff. So we've done some videos on the website that we put across. But the idea is to show you what you can do. So this is basically a calendar web code basically inside FileMaker. So this stuff that basically is you can actually have working quite easily by just importing sort of HTML and stuff like that. So the way I've actually got it stored is now the FileMaker is not really in a folder. It's basically everything is in the package. So when you install it, you'll get your DMG file, and then you just basically drag your FileMaker into, so like every other Mac app, it just works on its own without having need a folder. Windows will still work the other way, so you still have a folder. But within my resources, basically, I've got this new add-on module. And so this is the normal add-on modules, but it's a nice way for me to be able to actually store data. And this is the calendar, basically, code that I'm going to basically be using. So I've got an HTML page, which is just normal HTML, that is talking to CSS to get the sort of everything properly done. And it's going to basically be talking as well to JavaScript file that has information to actually run the web app and be able to actually talk back to my my FileMaker system. So I'm going to not going to spend ages going it, but basically this is the HTML that actually sort of talks back. And at the bottom you can see I've got something called the web scripting GS, which is this tiny file basically that kind of explain when I click on the button how it's going to talk back to FileMaker. So the code that basically you'll be using in those files is just a what we call FileMaker.perform script, and it's basically just going to look for the name of the script that has to actually activate in FileMaker to run a command. So it's quite a straightforward, but it works nicely. And the way it does, so this is my calendar layout, and the other one that I have is I've got an event table. As you can see, I've got a quick link basically just to make sure that my calendar and my event can actually talk to one another. It doesn't do much in that. So if I create basically on new schedule, it's going to have this pop-up window. So this is not basically using anything FileMaker. It's basically talking to the JavaScript. So I'm going to do a test location. I'll just say home. We'll put it for tomorrow, end date, same day. We'll pop for the next date. And I just do save. And so basically it's written information in my table and on my fields, and I've got all the information. And all basically I had to do was create a couple of scripts. So add event, it's basically just picking up variables, getting into proper sort of JSON mode, and then talking back to the GS file to so the GS to do stuff into the file, and then create the information back into FileMaker. So what we'll do once we actually have that launch, we'll give you some more example. And we were meant to actually have for this release in the add-on section here those JavaScripts, but because we've noticed that for people to actually know JavaScript and to play with it, you can do modification quite easily. For normal users, if they do updates, whether to the tables, they might actually kill it completely. So we thought, let's wait a bit, but at least we've got this new script type called perform JavaScript in web viewer, which is basically just looking at an object and then the function that it's had to look at, and then just basically activate that in the JavaScript file. And then if I move my stuff around, as you can see, it's basically updating the data straight away in my other table. Quickly move on to the next one that I had, which is this one. So NFC tagging. So I've got a couple of NFC tags. This is one. I actually bought them on Amazon from a UK company called nfctagify.com. They cost about, I think, about 10p each. And all you can do basically is you write data to an NFC tag. So NFC, for those who've never seen it, you basically use it pretty much on transport cab now. Business cars have got them pretty much everywhere on the planet. So I'm going to show you my phone. So with the app, basically, FileMaker Go can't actually write data to the NFC tag. So you need to actually get either a piece of kit that you plug into your laptop, or you can just use a NFC app on the App Store. There's, I don't know, so many out there. Found this one to be the easiest one to use. It has three buttons, one for reading and one for writing. So what I'm going to basically do is write a new message inside my NFC and actually get that read from FileMaker. So this is basically the standard stuff that you pretty much have when you write NFC. That's when you write sort of business NFC that haven't got that much data. Obviously, you can buy really sort of NFC tags that have more information, and then you have special software that can actually add more stuff. But I could actually be putting a business card, could be a shortcut to anything. I could send location information, a web link, so you could potentially have an FMP URL in the system, a text, a phone number, pretty thing, whatever you want. So if I put a web link, I'm just going to basically put the Apple website. And it's going to save that. And I'm going to basically write that. So I click on write, put it on top of my tag, and it's reading basically the information. And so now if I go into my app, so I'm going to open that as well on the side. That one. So that's the one. So all I had to do basically is I've created a couple of scripts. So I've got one basically that is the configure NFC reading. And so based on that, I have two types of actions. You can actually read. So basically get the iOS device to start reading for NFC, or just cancel if you want one. Once it actually read something, you need to actually assign a script, and then you can do a timeout. So if it hasn't received any information, it says 60 seconds to actually stop reading. Then the script that I'm basically using when it basically picks up the tag is to grab some information back. So whenever you actually get information back from the tag, it's going to go to your script parameter. So you have to actually either put that into a field or variable, and the script parameter has all the information back from the tag. Normally you get about 8 lines of code, and then I've got a system to actually be able to actually parse it. So if I just go back to my phone on that, hopefully, so NFC tagging. And if I go list layout, no. So if I tag it, maybe the format tag. So this is information. So basically the values you get at the top is tag red, or we got 2 other values. This is the information I got back. This is to tell me the payload was, I got 1 tag to give me back some information. Actually, I actually wrote 2 because the 2 stuff that I had were on the same line. So this is the type of information, so URL and stuff like that. So it's quite straightforward, but it's potentially you could do anything with it. You could use it for writing business cards. If you create event systems and people basically want to get information on their iPhone, they could basically just tag a tag at a stand and get the information back. So I mean, there's so many stuff that you can do with NFC. There's a lot of potential out there. Just the one thing to remember is you can only read on FileMaker Go. You can't actually write anything. And then the core ML. So core ML is actually quite straightforward. There's a good website from on the Apple one, if I can find it again, because I was where they give you, I guess this one. So they give you basically basic information about core ML. So the one thing about core ML, it's a model that's using both the CPU of your machine or the GPU and the neural engine that's actually within the machine to be able to actually recognize the information you actually sent in the image or text. So currently only works on Mac or iOS, not on Windows machine. And then so you'll, on this website, what's quite nice is they give you a couple of models that actually do the work for you. So there's a few on imaging, so most of them are around images, and there's the one that they've got, which is around text, and this one is about answer questions. If you want really powerful one, you can go to the IBM Watson webpage. They have a lot out there, but pretty much you can actually find quite a few out there. So what I'm going to do basically is, which is kind of straightforward, you have a script step where you basically configure the model that you want to use. So you actually tell it what you want to do. So you've got 3 options. Unload is to remove it out of memory. Vision is to view images or videos. And general is around text. Then you give it a name so that you can actually call it back in your next step. You put your model into a container, and so you have to call it. And that's pretty much what you do there. And what I've done, basically, I'm going to get result in JSON, and then I'm going to basically clean that up. So what I've done is in my table, I've got this this calculation where I'm just checking that basically the image that I've got is a PNG, and I'm basically using this compute model. So I'm saying is use, oops, should be a different name. Use the model that I've actually got in memory called model to look at the image and say, okay, look at the image container. This is an image, and then to give me back the information that is getting back from that. And then I've got another one where it's going to basically clean that up and give me the best result from the search. Oops. Okay. So I've got a couple of the models. The one I'm going to use is this one, MobileNet. You can use those two, the better one. SqueezeNet is different because I think it doesn't work as well, but it's just basically on the image maybe that I'm using. So I'm going to basically insert MobileNet in that. I'm going to load that into memory, and then I'm going to drop an image of the train. As you can see, it's giving me the best result of this. So the numbers are between 0.0 and 1. I've tried with a lot of images. I can never get a complete one because the one thing you've got to understand about a model is it doesn't know whether it's right or wrong, and it doesn't know what you're expecting to get out of it. So I could basically be saying that this is the image that I'm giving him, but what I'm looking for is information on this. And so the model doesn't know that. The model basically goes is look at the image and try to figure out what it is, but the whole image, not just part of it, but the whole image. And so a lot of the problem with AI, that people think that AI is really clever and can make decisions for you, that actually that's wrong. Is AI is just there to help you. So even though you can train to do AI a lot of stuff, it doesn't think as much as the human. So you have to actually give a bit more information on exactly what you're looking to get out of it. If I do this one, so this is the new toyable myself, it doesn't know where it is because there are too many colors and the image is from 5 days ago, and it's like, I just can't do anything with that. But if I put this image of an elephant, it will be able to actually give you back some information on what it is. So this is quite straightforward. If I use the other model, open that, put into memory, and then try with this image. So basically, it's giving me 99. So it's pretty much no, it's a cheater, but it will never give him one, even though it knows pretty much that. It might just think that actually there's stuff in the background. I don't know where it is. So this is the best that I can give you for the time being. So this is CoreML. It's really easy to use. It's really kind of fun, and then you can do whatever. The one thing that if you want to, you can create your own model using Xcode with a function sort of create ML, and you can basically just feed it a huge amount of images, give it some information. It's going to learn from that, and then you can actually use that in your system. So what I was playing with it, if you wanted to create your own tracking for an event and have checking basically that everyone has a picture of themselves on their invitation, and then you can check with the image it's the right person, you can do stuff with that. So I mean, it goes a long way after that. Text wise, you can do some stuff with it. It's better to use Watson because they've got more powerful models. In terms of size, sometimes they're kind of big. So because this function works, because the file is in a container, it can work offline. Sometimes with text, it's better to actually use something that's online because potentially it needs a lot more information. But I've seen stuff on the internet where you could give it like text in English, and then you can have a model that actually will translate the stuff back in French for you in an offline model. Check if I've got nothing else important. Not really. So basically, as you can see, so now for macOS, we've got this drag and drop installer. And the one thing, especially if you're doing runtimes, there's a function. Within the preference, you can have this open file at startup, and then you potentially use FileMaker Pro to actually open up a file straight away and use it as a runtime if you want to. We're still trying to even get maybe FileMaker Pro, yeah, on the App Store for the Mac, but that's taking time from Apple to make their decision. Like everything is, they are taking a lot of time in the process. So as it's getting late for everyone, I'm going to take questions now. Ooh, 32 in the chat. Wow.
Nice presentation, Doug. Superb. Thank you.
Excellent, Doug. Thank you.
So can CoreML do? I'm gonna start from the top. Hang on. So see if I can do when it started.
Doug, I just wanted to just quickly interject on that AI piece, just based on the comments, only because we've been doing quite a bit with that over the, well, as you know, Doug, because we've had 1,000 on questions for you. I think for us, and again, I think it was different for everybody. I think for us, it's fundamentally changed the way we think about building a FileMaker solution. And the thing that changed it for us was straight away when we thought about AI, we were thinking about like image recognition, facial recognition, like all of that piece. But then we came across a use case in which a production line who was building medical devices wanted to digitize the whole production line so they could have basically live stats of how many widgets they'd made in a day, or how many had been scrapped, and how everything else. And usually, during our typical FileMaker approach, would be saying, okay, well, let every single operative have an iPad and let their work come across, and they choose it on the iPad and everything else. And somebody came up with the idea of, well, why can't you just have a whiteboard at the end of each station? And why can't, at the end of a shift, somebody just take a picture of the whiteboard and you automatically pull all the data off the whiteboard? So it basically turned what would have been a 6-month project of digitizing this whole multinational corporation's production line into a virtual production line into, yeah, no problem, we'll just put a whiteboard with an iPad at the end of each station and people can take pictures of the whiteboard. And then the board gets the reporting they want. And all of a sudden, it just transformed the way we think about capturing data within FileMaker, or just that whole approach of you don't actually have to digitize a process anymore. You can just take a picture of it.
Cool. Okay, so I got that. So I just picking one. So basically for the updater, so on Linux, the way it works is everything is you have to actually go through the terminal anyway to actually do the updates. And so you'll just basically have to run an RPM update, but you won't actually have to reinstall everything. So the way we work with the updates is we can add extra stuff within the current installed FileMaker Server or Pro without having to reinstall everything from the top. So we're trying to make our updaters better, so it can do more stuff without sort of breaking everything into it.
Doug, I asked a question about the updater, which was if you're doing a more regular release cycle, say every quarter, every month, or whatever it is you're doing, no disrespect to the efforts that Claris make to make sure that the product works well, but it takes me 2 or 3 versions to go through testing. It can take me over 6 months to test our solutions because of the size of it. So the concern I have is that version of, like, you doing V releases, that's fine. Is there going to be a chance that when you release a version fix within your solution, I cannot take the first version of a new piece of product? If you see what I mean, because I don't want the brand new thing out the box, because I don't know that it's tested and it could break things. And I don't have that luxury to have any, I can't test, we don't have that way of deploying. So
it's one of the things that we're trying to get to is to move away basically from, because with this numbering sort of section, so saying that you've got 19 and then you gotta have 20. The idea is to say is whenever there's something coming out new, you can have it. If you don't want it, it's fine because it still works the way it's meant to. And then once you have a second version of an update or of a new feature that we have, then you can decide to actually have it. And so we're trying to
just to be clear on that, if there was a V1 release of a piece of software, I don't care about the numbering, that's not relevant. It's just whether the feature in that works. So that's a V1 of that feature. Say the JavaScript stuff that's coming out in 19, that comes out straight away, fine. Hopefully it works and it's reliable. There's a bug in that. I wouldn't ever take a V1 release of anything and put that in production. Just wouldn't. So you get the version release update in, say, V2 to fix that bug. But in V2 is also a release of a new version of something else, because you're releasing that fast. So I don't want to take the first version of the new thing. I just want the version fix of the previous thing.
Okay, I get what you mean.
So how the hell do you deal with that? Because I can never take a version release.
Doug, we did the council picked up on that and expressed, Gary, what you're saying, which is part of the USP of FileMaker is the stability in terms of business knowing that once it's up and running, it's you're almost fixed for the next 12 months, right? Or for the next 2 years before you then have to do another major upgrade. So we did raise that as well.
Yeah, I can talk to PM about that, whether there's potentially the option to actually have fixes, but not everything in one go.
Yeah, that would be the way to do it in the installer or the updater. You say, well, there's 2 fixes in this. You want to take the fixes, but not the new version, new thing that's coming to that release. And that's great. If you could do that, I want the fixes, absolutely.
Yeah, but not, Yeah, we'll see whether support, because the thing is, one of the things that it's really hard for us to actually sort of figure out exactly where it's going is, we're going to have, because we're going to have less version to support, we can spend more time in updating and fixing bugs quicker than before. And so if we know that basically we have the majority of the customers on the current version or one before that, then it's easier to say, actually, there's a fix for this bug. You can have it now, and you don't need to actually install everything around it. But we need to make sure, first of all, that we have the majority of the customers on at least the last 3 version now, before moving everywhere. And we currently know that we have still a huge amount of customers on FileMaker 11 and before that, and on 12, 13, stuff like that. And so we want to sort of get those people to be able to actually move to the latest system safely and not just break everything for them. So
I'm pleased to announce that we've moved up to the latest version, so we're bang up to date at the moment.
It does take a bit of time. I'm going to see if I can go back to where it was. Even for the ETS, because we're going to have more smaller features coming out, we're going to try to increase the ETS, even the FDS, so that we get more feedback from users. Similar to what basically Apple is doing with the beta version that they've actually been doing for, I think, 4 version now, where they're bringing it out to the customers. You can play with it. You give us a lot of feedbacks. And based on that feedbacks, we can actually fix the bugs before we actually get the stuff released. Because even though we have quite a big QA team, they can't test everything, and they can't test in all the various environments that you can see out there. So the idea is to get more information back from you, just to test whether stuff actually does work out, or whether it just breaks everything and it's the worst stuff that we've actually done. So this is where we're trying to get to. So stuff for JavaScript. So you could have it. You could have it basically stored within the file. You could have it stored on a web server somewhere out there. You could have it like John was showing. You could have it stored in the gray area, and then you basically use some of the function FileMaker to call it up. Pretty much up to you. You could have it stored even in a field as text, and then call that up into your when you need it to. So it depends on the JavaScript that you're going to be using. So if it's really basic, like a calendar, I would say you could just put it on the web server and actually use that. If you're using like some of the build, sort of like the charting, like D2 library for charting, where some of the functions are really, really complex, definitely have that on web server running on the side of your FileMaker server, because it's actually quite kind of big. See if I can find other questions. There's a question about sort of Office 64 bugs, clashes. So we're hoping that Microsoft has now removed pretty much everything that was 32-bit. There's a new update of Windows 10 coming out quite soon. They did one in April, which apparently was really bad because they're taking out code that actually gets everything else to work around it. So from the tests that we've done internally, it seems to be stable now, but we know there's still issues with Outlook, depending on which version is being used. So I can't really sort of say 100% that you're going to have issues, but that's sadly we can't control Microsoft as much as you want to. Yes, talk about CoreML. So saying is the basic ones, you can find them on the Apple website. If you're looking to do more stuff like, let's say, like OCR, text analysis, IBM Watson is pretty much the better one. There's a huge of stuff out there. But the problem is basically when you think of doing like OCR is really hard to do, even though we're trying to actually have it in one, maybe other future instances of FileMaker. It's really hard to actually do everything around it because OCR is a massive app on its own. And so to be able to actually integrate the AI side of it, to be able to actually give you the right stuff all the way through, takes quite a bit of processing power. And the idea is for CoreML, even though it's Mac, you can use on a Mac, the usage mainly is to be done on an iOS device. But if you have like CoreML working really hardly on an iPhone, it's going to drain the battery. And so we don't want to basically sort of start killing one end of the product by looking at making stuff harder. So this is where we're trying to work. I know that the ML team in the US at Apple is working on ways to actually make sure that the models can actually be less hungry in power and resources and smaller in sizes. But it's going to take a few years, I think, for something to be really able to actually do image recognition on the phone for every type of images if you just give it one image. I've tried with the systems that I have and it just doesn't recognize me. So it's going to take more time than that. Maybe I'm not famous enough so the AI just goes, you're not important, so we don't really care. But one of the things I was mentioning first is one of the things that we really want to do, which has always been sort of one of, is really sort of help you figure out how to use the new stuff that we have. So if you have ideas and you have no idea how to do it, send me an email or give me a call and we'll see whether we can help you. And across the community is basically sort of get this information out so that we have normal users that can't actually spend a huge amount of time on their solution. If they can find information better, whether it's community or different website, to be able to actually use it, I think it's going to be beneficial for everyone. Because we have this gap that we have really talented developers, and then we have people that basically need to fix problems, and sometimes they just go, I just need to do this really quickly. How can I do it? And either they've got the time to actually talk to the developer and explain what they want to do, and sometimes they just want to find information. And when they go to community, and I know that community is not the best place on the planet to find information, it's not the worst, but it's in between. They really sort of have issue with that. So we're working on finding ways to make sure that people can actually get the right information quicker and in an easier way. And if we have to spend more time explaining how to use it and what to do with it, then that's what we'll do. So because I know that is the greatest strength that we have, and especially now we've seen that there's a lot more competitors out there than before. And if you ask anyone from the sales team that 5-6 years ago, we could say there was like 6 or 7 maybe big competitors to FileMaker. Now we're looking at basically maybe between 50 and 60 across the globe. And so we know that basically this is a place where we're going to see a lot more company going, oh, actually I've seen this company, it can do the same as what you're doing, and it's going to be cheaper. And we have to find the good sort of stuff that is better within FileMaker and connect to actually make sure they actually stick with it. And the one thing that we have, that we've taken for granted versus the rest is the community, whether it's Claris partners or you guys or everything around it. We do see that's a major positive point for us. And so we're going to basically elevate that so that everyone knows that it's really out there.
Doug, a quick question.
Yeah.
Have we got any updates on timelines for Claris Connect or Cloud having EU data centers?
So for the cloud, we've got approval from Apple for the Irish one. We're just waiting for the German one. So I'm hoping that this summer it should be going through. We should have the Japanese one is going to be the next one to be launched, because they've done more work in Japan to actually get it out. But we're hoping that this summer we get all the approvals by Apple to get everything sorted and actually have that in Europe.
Will Connect follow after that?
At the same time.
Okay.
It's all in the same bubble. So, but with Connect, it's slightly different, because with Connect, there's very little data being stored in our server. It's just basically traffic. So it's less important to actually have it in Europe. But for some deals, it has to be there, like medical stuff and government and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
It needs
exactly.
to be. We need to actually be able to prove that it's in Europe. And so the plan that we're having, and because of Brexit, we've had to actually get the English one. So we pretty much will have Ireland, Frankfurt, and a UK-based one. That is the plan. But it's the one thing that with COVID that's actually made it a lot easier for us to talk, especially with Americans, is to understand that they're actually not working from the office, they're working from home. You really need to actually have good internet connection, and you need local servers. And that's the one thing they've noticed in the US now, that if you work on the East Coast and you work in New York and everything is based in Santa Clara Valley, if you're not, speed-wise, it could be really bad. So they're suddenly basically going, oh, actually, we need stuff in Europe, because European customers need stuff to actually close to them. And even the Apple guys have done a huge amount of work to get this whole sort of Amazon side of that we use for the cloud to be working really better than before. Like even for the VPNs, they've done a huge amount of work, because they've realized that for European customers, you need stuff in Europe, not in the US and on the West Coast. And as you see, John's saying is, with Linux server, you could pretty much install it wherever you wanted to. I mean, you could do the cheap version on Amazon, where and it's not an extra. You don't have to actually pay extra for Linux server. It's part of your license, and so you could install that on the cheapest version at Amazon. You could install it on any data center that has Linux CentOS, or even the Red Hat version. But the Red Hat version, I think you have to pay for support. So it's not really that interesting, but you could even install it on a Raspberry Pi with their wonky version of CentOS, which is not meant to be working, but I've seen people getting it to work. But yeah, you could build a £50 Linux box with FileMaker running on that, and it will just do fine. Put it on top of your fridge with a plug in the back, and yeah, you're set to go.
I'll leave that to Guy. Guy's the man for Raspberry Pis and fridges.
In the chat.
There you go.
I'm not saying you will do it, Guy, but you never know.
Oh yeah, we'll find a way.
But no, but the Linux version is for big companies. I had a call last week with a big French company, and that was the thing. They're like, "Oh, okay, that's cool," because we can't stand Windows anymore. I mean, the number of companies actually moving away completely from Windows as a whole, and Microsoft is kind of big. I don't know why, whether it's pricing, whether there's some policies and stuff like that, whether they're all moving to Google, but we've clearly seen people sort of having enough, I think, of paying for extra support with no reason. So for Christmas, I think now, because I got an email I think now there's a Raspberry Pi with a 64-bit CPU that you can put on it. I'm not really sure whether it's Raspberry Pi or the other one, but I did see somewhere. I'll hunt it down for you. I'll send you the link. I think one of our engineers in Japan or China was playing with that. But if it's Chinese made, it might be something weird that doesn't really exist. You know, with Chinese, we can't really trust them anymore. So. Cool. So release date, I haven't got one, but it's in May, so a couple of weeks time. So you'll get all your stuff by email. If you see the email saying it's being released and you haven't received your link to download, it takes between 2 and 5 days to send. I think we send 250,000 emails around the planet, and so we can't just go in one go because otherwise we're blacklisted. We tried 2 years ago. We got blacklisted from so many servers around the planet that it was a bit messy. So roughly between 3 and 4 days after the launch, you should get your everything sorted.
That's good.
And then the one thing is, yes, I know people have been sort of moaning about the logo. So everything is with the Claris logo, and everything, depending on the product, the color is different. So blue is for FileMaker, green is for Connect. Once we run out of colors, we'll come up with a new logo, but we've got time before we get to that point. And just for everyone, FileMaker is not dying. People were like, yeah, you're going to kill it. It's like, no, we're not killing it. We just basically, there's stuff that we can't do in FileMaker, like Connect, basically, it's stuff that there is no way in hell we could actually do that in FileMaker on-premise for so many customers. It's a lot easier for us to actually do on the cloud and do the monitoring around it. So it's a plus on FileMaker. It's not replacing at all FileMaker.
Good.
Cool.
Anyone else got any questions, or are we pretty much at the end there? No? Gary, do you want to mention something about the feedback, the survey, the poll?
The only thing I was going to do is there was a poll at the start that was running. If you go to slide.do and then you can find the event, I'll post it up on the chat again at the top of the chat. And all I was going to do, if I get the right link, here we go. If I grab this link here, and I'll send this to you guys. Stick that back down at the bottom. I'm going to put a new poll up there, and all I was going to do is just put it's more of a poll of how you found the event. Anything that it's just a quick Q&A sort of session. So there's the poll. I'm going to do another link for the Q&A, which is here for the questions. And the idea of that is, after this session ends, if you keep a note of that URL, I'm going to keep this up and running for a couple of days. If you've got any questions about improvements or whatever, bearing in mind I threw most of this together on a weekend just before this event. I was doing some stuff with Joel beforehand, so the technology seems to have all stayed up. Doug, I just want to let you know the live stream of YouTube I stopped when you started talking because I didn't realize you were doing NDA stuff, so I killed that. So that's gone. And obviously this is all being recorded, but the recording's only going to be held by me and Joel. So if you need to get hold of that, we'll find somewhere to put it if you want to play back the recording, and that's fine. I don't know if there was a little poll beforehand, which was a question that they put up. 10 people have done the poll at last. Yeah, keep going with the poll, guys. I'll give the results back later. Maybe we'll email them out or post them out somewhere.
We can do mainly.
It is Star Wars Day, so I think I have the best prop ever, because I kind of do, but that's what I do for a living. So I knew I was going to win as far as that's concerned. And yeah, I don't know what we're doing after this. I know Joel was going to do go grab a beer, take a break, go eat some food, but I'm not planning for the stream to end straight away. If we've got questions or conversation that we want to do, I'm going to stick around for a while. I can stop the recording now, but leave this up and running because there's no point our questions and Q&A going on recording. But
yeah, I think what would be good is to have a 10-minute break for people to stretch their legs, get a drink, whatever, get some dinner if they haven't already eaten it, and then just have an open session where we can carry on chatting for those who want to. If you're cool with that, Gary.
I'm fine. I'm just going to leave the feed running. Provided no one leaves it, it's going to stay there. So you can go there. I'll kill it once everyone's got bored and fallen asleep, probably. So.
Okay.
Cool. I want to thank all the speakers and everyone for attending, because it's a great turnout. I was impressed as many people turned out, so which is great.
Yeah, definitely.
You knew that many people, Gary.
Well, I know. I didn't tell them you were attending, Jordan, so that's fine.
Okay. Well, a big thank you to everyone who came. It's really good to see so many people coming, and an even bigger thank you to all the people who presented and did their stuff. And yeah, let's keep this going. There'll be another one in, well, they're scheduled every 2 months. So at the moment, we'll keep that going on that. And yeah, please do give Gary, me, whatever, lots of feedback on this as to where you want it to go. It's all about you guys as much as us. So with that, I guess 10 minutes or so to refresh yourselves, and if you want, and then in other words, I'm going for a little break. But let's just carry on, and I'm going to get myself a beer probably. And,
I think, Joel, we're going to go for a break. We're going to come back. We're going to be the only 2 left. Everyone else would have left.
Well, that's a risk. In that case, bye to those of you who are going off, and I hope to see you at the next one. See you in a few minutes, those who are staying.
Yeah, cool. Thanks a lot, guys. Cheers.
I have a question, if anybody's still online.
I'm still here.
The JavaScript part, if you make it part of your local app, how does the server then know that the JavaScript is available to other people that use the solution on the server?
So, do you mean in the example I showed you?
Yeah, you go in the content.
Yes, so if you were to do it that way, I'm going to share my screen. Sorry, it's going to be easier that way. So the way I've done it is because I've got like multiple copies of my FileMaker Pro, but I've just saved that in my file. But you could actually so if you have a Mac, it's a lot easier than on Windows.
Right.
But because now the FileMaker Pro is just one app, you could recreate a DMG and actually have that sent to all the users. So before, basically, people actually installed a copy of FileMaker Pro, you could actually create your own copy of FileMaker Pro, and then inside your resources, have whatever mergers you wanted to have.
So I have to redistribute the app to all my 50 or so users.
Yeah. So if you have a lot of users, you could do whether you have something like Jamf in the background or like an MDM system for the Mac. Otherwise, it's not ideal. Or you could actually have that running. So the file itself, you could actually have that running on a web server somewhere in your office. The only thing is you have to actually have a separate machine on the side.
Right. So that's how you do it now.
Yeah. The bigger difference that you have with I would say like something like a calendar package is you're not going to really change anything once you've actually built it and it's talking to your FileMaker tables. There's not a lot that actually is going to change because that file, the HTML, the JavaScript, you don't really make changes to that. It's like standard. It just basically does the UI and the UX, and it's pretty much done. So once you've done it, unlike FileMaker, you won't actually do updates. If you want to, then that's where you pretty much would need actually a web server on the side to actually to fill this information out. So there's different ways of actually doing it. The reason actually I put it directly in my file is if I put it on an iPad with that connection to the internet, I can actually still have it working properly. So if I put this file on my iPad, it works exactly the same way, even if I've got connection to the internet or not.
Which file we're talking about now?
This FileMaker file. If I put that directly, no, it's not going to work. Sorry, because I put it on my FileMaker. Sorry. So I would need it to actually do the way that John it's done in the example, is you put all your different files inside in text as text in your FileMaker. But for this one, it's kind of, I think it's kind of small. Let me go back into it.
I presume you'd only move the JavaScript into the way that you've done it if it was going to be really intensive, right? Otherwise, there's no real benefit. the effort versus reward of doing that, I suppose, is only gained if you have some real intensive JavaScript. Otherwise, you might as well just keep it inside your FileMaker file, put it on the server, and let it run as normal.
Yeah. So you could even store that in containers and then call them up when you need to. So this one is kind of basic. It hasn't got much, but as you can see, it's got all the CSS, different stuff like that. So there's a bit of information to actually have. So yeah, it's whatever is actually best for you. I do it that way for testing purposes.
Right.
I think if you had like a web server running on the side, you could really sort of have that anyway.
Right. So it doesn't sync that to the server in some clever way.
For this example, no.
Yeah.
But you could do it. I would say like if you have containers, you can store the file in containers, and then have those basically read whenever you need to.
Right. Yeah. Or you can lay them in the template. Yeah.
Yeah.
On that in the past.
So you could do that one. The other example that I have, let me see if I can find it. So this is another type of calendar. I think this is using. So for this example, basically, is the HTML is located on the side.
Yeah.
So in my case, so I've got the GS in here. This is the CSS, and this is the HTML. If I copy that. So this is quite a small file. So you could do it that way if it's easier for you.
Well, so that's the thing, right? Because you have to keep going back and forth. You have to deal with quotes, that kind of thing. So I really like the idea of putting it in the app, but then you need to redistribute the app.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So this is the
with having the text on that right hand side and getting that layout, it's not attributes, the get layout content.
Yeah.
A, is there a performance benefit, and B, once we go full multi-threaded, will that not break?
So one of the stuff that's actually changed in FileMaker 16 is all the information that you actually put on the side here is being loaded, and so whether you need or not. So the issue that you would have is if you're moving about between layouts, every time you go back, it's going to reload that information from here and not from memory. So if you have a big GS file in that, it will reload everything from scratch every time. So it could actually have a bit of an impact on the server.
But I was thinking as well, if the interface layer moves to being multi-threaded and the interface layer is processed, or the data is processed before the interface, or vice versa, then you would still end up with a problem of because your object is reliant on calculating something from the layout, not from the data schema.
Yeah.
That in essence you could really fall out. Could you not fall out of sync completely?
Yeah, if you had too much data, that you could actually have that eventually. Yeah, that could be one of the issue. Yeah, I think if you have like a big sort of JavaScript stuff in the background, maybe the web server would be the better way to manage that. Especially, I mean, they get updated all the time. So if you look like D2 charting, I think it gets updated like on a weekly basis. So you might want to basically make sure that if someone sort of changes something and it creates a bug, then you can actually have a way to fix it easily than normal way. I mean, it seems like curl. Basically, there's bugs every day. So I was going to try to show you the other one that I had for. Yeah, so you got those two. So this one as well is GS, and I've got the text on the side. I think that one is quite gorgeous. That's the one. So you just basically you have an HTML file. You'll have a GS. You might have a CSS somewhere. CSS.
So it would be great if FileMaker has a little text editor that you could use outside the layout for this kind of stuff.
We were going to have one, yeah. It's going to come out. So not at the release of 19, but further down the line, there's going to be one coming out as well. So,
oh, great. Yeah, that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. But the idea is, because the thing is, yeah, people have been asking us to actually do that. And it's a real, I mean, I've been using charts in FileMaker for a long time. And the engine the engine that we use is really outdated and crap and doesn't do much most of the time. So it's a lot easier for us to go and use stuff that's out there that been working properly for a long time into our system versus trying to actually get everything, and especially charting. I mean, it's the biggest area we've had people asking for stuff. There's so many variations of how you can do a chart. If you have that into CD, I mean, if you build that, that's not one. You would make this interface really hard to understand, because if I had like 150 different types of charts, it would just be unusable. So we just thought, let's keep the way it is now, and then just really sort of focus on actually getting GS working properly.
Doug, can you not just load that CSS and text that you've got to the side of the screen there into a variable, and then you've got it when it's there, it's done?
You could do as well, yeah. The problem is yeah, you would actually have it as a global variable, and it should call it up. It might mean that it does more refreshes of the web viewer from the variable. I can check it out. I'll check it with the engineers just to see where is the best place to actually store it.
So you muted again. You were getting an echo.
Well, I'm unmute. Oh, sorry. We can't hear you. Can't hear you anyway.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Right. So if you load it into a variable and then you test if the variable exists, then it doesn't reload
it. But it does for the web viewer. So whenever the web viewer is going to refresh, it has to grab back all the data from. So it will refresh at that time. I'll check with engineers just to see whether they think it's better to actually have it in the gray area and just call it through script step or having a variable. I haven't really tested that side of it.
I mean, the web page is going to refresh. Yeah, if you change layout, it's going to refresh anyway. You're not going to be able to stop that. But it doesn't actually have to go and scrape the data again because it's already in there in a variable. And you can put it, if you put it in a container field, then it's going to be the same on every layout you use that you use that particular bunch of stuff for, because it's just accessing that, just scraping it out of that.
Yeah, so the way it's doing it's setting the way we work. Actually, I'll check with the engineers.
Yeah,
actually have been testing on what works best.
So you might have to carefully. If those bedazzled screens are going out, and everybody's then going to build from the method that's in those bedazzled screens.
So those screens are just for the website. I've just got a demo file, but they're not fully working. So some of it is.
But they're not going to be template files.
They're not. I've been trying to, but for the time being, no. We're working on it to see whether we can actually bring this. So what we're going to do is actually pull all of that and then put into a file and then have explanation into it so that people know exactly how it works. But the problem is, because when we try to actually some of the user groups, when we actually have this information on the side, they go, but you can't put stuff in here, and they go, well, actually you can, and they get completely lost. So we've got to find a way for people to understand how everything works, and without scaring them, because that is our biggest scare, is if we scare people away from FileMaker when they see that you have so much JavaScript all around the place. But then for the bigger clients, it means that it's better because they go, oh, I've seen it on the internet. I really like that. Can I have it in my solution? And you can go, is there a JavaScript for that? And if they go, yes, you get it, of course. So it's the balance of, do we want to have bigger customer, or do we have more customers actually bring us maybe not less revenue, but more sort of different stuff. So I think there was a question. One second. Can you create a new function to get the text? Get count. We could, but we have one that actually already does it. So
because the one that I put, get layout object attributes, and then you put the name in, and then you say content. It's beautiful. It works brilliantly. But if you want to make it simple for people, you know, it's a bit long-winded, etc., etc. If there was just a function that just gets the contents of a text box.
Yeah. So it's one of those catch-22 situation. Is do you need more function or script steps, or do you need to spend maybe more time explaining to people what they can do with it? Because the problem that we have is we know that around the, I don't know how many script step or function that we have, a lot of them are never used. And a lot of the time people could be using them if we told them exactly what they can do with it. So one of the big stuff that we're going to try to work for this year is to go back to maybe sometimes to basics and to explain why we have it, why it can be used, and not why we're creating a huge amount of new features now, or script step or stuff like that in new features, because we want to make sure that people can use some of the stuff that's been there for a long time and actually use it properly. Versus, and even though the get text content is something that people have been asking for, maybe we think that if we explain better how they could do it, maybe they can actually, we've already something that actually does it, and just by maybe typing a few characters more, they could actually do the same stuff. So if I go into my the help for 19, in terms of the new features, we haven't really got a lot of new stuff coming out. The script steps, we've got like 3, one of which is basically an updated function. We have 3 new functions, and then the rest are just changed. But if you look at the where else are the other functions? What I was looking for. Yeah, if you look at basically all the functions that we have a huge amount of stuff, and we know that a lot of people don't know how to use them. And so what we want to make sure is they know what they can do with those, and based on that afterwards, then we can say, okay, what is really missing from you that you haven't been able to do? Say something that you can't actually do, or we're really missing a new feature. And it's a lot easier to actually get the engineers to focus. And once we have something new coming out, we can say, this is what it's out, this is what it's going to do for you, and this is what's really going to help you evolve your solution. Because for so many years, we were bringing out new features where they were like, I don't know what to do with it. I've never used it. I wasn't aware it's there. What can I do with it and stuff like that. So that's one of the things that we're going to try to work on in the future.
Hey, Doug, I'm just wondering, thanks for the presentation. That was really good, by the way. Yeah. But with the web viewer, have you considered adding additional parameters within the dialog box for the web viewer for JavaScript libraries, HTML, etc.?
No, so the only one we've added is so the only thing is we've added allow JavaScript to perform farmer scripts. That's the only thing we've added.
I'm just thinking in this screen, if you added extra areas where we could put JavaScript libraries and put that text that we're putting off on the side, that might simplify things for people.
Yeah. So one of the ideas is to, yeah. So the idea is to
similar to that. So just have
the plan originally was when you actually click on add-ons, you have the 50 normal add-ons that we have, and then underneath you would have the JavaScript add-ons. And so we had like calendars. We removed that because once you insert that, it does a lot of stuff in the background where for brand new users, it doesn't affect, but for old users, where sometimes they're using old themes, classic and stuff like that, it could break a lot of the stuff. But the idea is eventually is you'll just basically select a JavaScript add-on that you want. You'll have it basically living here on the side. So exactly like if I choose this, and then from there, you would be able to actually drag it and do a bit of stuff with it. So this is where we're trying to actually get to. So potentially your JavaScript, all the elements that you need will be stored in this area, and then you just have to call it on the side. But like the same thing is we have to make sure that mature developers and new users and everything in between understands what they can do with it, and when they start using it, that they don't break everything. Because if they break it because we've actually given a new feature and it breaks everything they've done, they're not going to renew the licensing, and then we're going to go bust. So
we definitely don't want that.
Yeah, well, more me than you, I think. Well, it's the same for everyone. But so we're just trying to maybe take a bit more time in getting this all sorted.